Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Wheel of Games. Today we're going to be playing another game from the wheel. This is called Deep Rock Galactic. It's based on a video game of the same name. In this game, you play as a group of 1 to 4 dwarves going cooperatively deep underground in some kind of space, either asteroid or remote planet. In this game, the objectives vary from mission to mission, but you're always mining, gathering resources of some kind. The goal is pretty much always to get in, do something, and then get back out. This is one of my favorite games of probably all time, computer-wise. I've played an enormous amount of this game in video game form, and I was so happy when they adapted it to a board game in a Kickstarter a year or two ago. And since I've gotten this, I've loved it, and I've played maybe half of the missions. I keep sort of starting over, introducing new people to the game. So I've definitely loved it so far. It's an amazing adaptation, probably the best adaptation of like a video game to a board game that I've ever seen. Because one of the aspects of this game is the different roles that the different dwarf types have. Like your engineer who plays with a turret, sort of a point holding kind of specialty, versus, say, the gunner who's got a minigun who excels at killing bugs but maybe isn't the best at gathering the resources or maybe the most mobile. So this game really adapts the different feel of each of the different classes in the video game into specialties that really shine in the board game as well. It's amazing. And that's part of the reason why this is one of my favorite games. I've played the first few missions a whole bunch of times, but definitely haven't gotten into the later halves. Also, each of the missions, because there's the 4 different character types, and you can play with any number of dwarves and any combination of dwarves, you could try tackling the mission again with a different set and see if you can do better. There's also rules for designing your own caverns. I'm sure people have been spending time online designing custom layouts. Switch the overhead view for a second. So you've got this map, and the way that the maps are set up, each mission will show like, oh, put tiles here and here. So everything that's a dark space is solid rock, and the missions consist of a series of caverns. You drop into the caverns somewhere, and you can mine your way, mining holes in the rock, making your way between caverns, and so forth to get to the different caverns that are holding the resources you're trying to get to. So it's really an amazing system for how it works, but you can make your own maps. There's rules and recommendations for how to do that. So even beyond the campaign that comes with the game, there's also a lot more that you can do to enhance the gameplay beyond that. Okay, let me unpack the rest of this game, and I'll introduce it to you piece by piece. See you in a moment. And we're back. I think the best way to explain this game is to go over the overall game flow and then get into like the precise actions that you can take. So, the back of the rulebook has a very good summary. Overall, how a turn works is your dwarf will take their actions. You get up to 3 actions, and you can do any of the things from this list. After you've finished all of your actions with the dwarf, then you get an event phase where you draw a card. This is similar to like your pandemic or like the guard phase in Burgle Bros. You take your actions, now the game reacts, something triggers that you'll have to react to. Maybe it's a bug spawn, maybe it's a random beneficial event that's in the event deck. After you've taken your actions, you draw an event card, you resolve that, but after that's done, the next dwarf takes their turn, they do their 3 actions, you get another event phase, and so on and so forth, all the way through until you've either accomplished all of the objectives and gotten back to your starting point, or all of your dwarves are unconscious and the mission ends in defeat. If you choose to play with only 1 dwarf, then you get a companion named Bosco who takes actions after your dwarf every round. And those are also illustrated in here. It's really a subset of the dwarf's actions. Between the action phase and the event phase, Bosco gets to take a couple of actions as well. So after we've gone through all of the dwarf things, I think it'll make sense as to what those list of Bosco actions could be. It's basically like having sort of a second dwarf, someone who can help you if you get ambushed. Okay, that's the overall. So let's start going into the anatomy of a mission, because that will explain, why would you want to move or attack. So let's set up one of those now. In order to go over all of the actions that the dwarfs can take, I think it would be helpful to first set up a mission. So we're going to go set up the first mission from the mission book. It has a glossary teaching you what all the different symbols mean, what they look like. And then mission number 1, New Darkness, New Fortunes. The challenge level Greenbeard is basically for new players. That's what they call new players on the video game as well. This is basically the tutorial. So this is what we're going to use to learn how to play, and then we're going to play through it on the second half of the video. So, Mission 1, New Darkness, New Fortunes. Saddle up, dwarves. Recent tectonic activity on Hox's 4 has opened up a brand new sector for us to explore and exploit. Recon drones have reported the location of several morkite deposits in a shallow cave system with some precious apoca blooms. This is a straightforward mission. Descend into the cave system using the drop pod. Mine 5 morkite and 3 apoca blooms. Then get out of there before every beast on the planet wakes up and starts hunting you for breakfast. Parts of the cave system will require you to use your traversal tools, like the platform gun, grappling hook, and zip lines. Unless, of course, you prefer digging your way through the soil to get around the deep pits. Good luck down there. And so, as I said before, our objective is to collect 5 morkite, which is a green crystal, and 3 apoca blooms, which are one of the collectible types of resources. I'll show you what those look like in just a minute. And then, before starting, remove a couple of the more difficult cards from the Swarm deck so that you won't encounter the Oppressor during your tutorial mission. At the bottom there, it shows a mission-specific event. Some of the cards in the event deck will change depending on which mission it is, so there's a card that just says mission-specific event, and whenever you draw that card, you'll do what this action is, which in this case says place a grunt at each tunnel exit. And now we'll get into the most relevant part, the map. As you can see, this corresponds very nicely with what the playing surface looks like. So, in the top section, it shows the random minerals that you're going to be starting with. So there's the 5 green morkite, but you also start with 2 gold and 2 nitra. And those things are going to be randomly distributed along the outsides. Every spot where there's one of these gem tokens, you basically put those 9 resources, or however many the mission states, into the bag, and then you just draw them randomly to fill in those spaces. So with 5 morkite, it's possible that they could all show up on the right side here, nothing over on the left, but you never really know. So the minerals are randomly distributed along the outside edges of the cavern. Besides that, it shows that we have 5 different resources, 5 different random tokens that we're going to be distributing around the board, 3 of which are going to be the apoca blooms that we're looking for, and 2 of which are going to be loot bugs. So to show what these tokens look like, the loot bug has this little pickaxe symbol on top of it, but the back is a question mark. And the same is true for the apoca blooms. What we do with these is for each one of these little spots that has a flare on it, we shuffle these up and they get put face down onto those. So we also don't know where in the caves our objectives are going to be for the blooms as well. So we're going to have 9 minerals randomly shuffled around and 5 of these random collectibles, 3 of which are going to be our second objective token. Also on the map, it shows where we need to put our cave segments. It shows where the drop pod is going to come in. As soon as your dwarves have exited those spaces, you flip it over and it becomes just normal dugout cave sections. We have some stalagmites that block our progress, starting bugs. It shows you where to put the tunnel exit tokens, which are where your enemy bugs are going to be spawning. There's a glossary for what types of bugs these different icons correspond to. In this case, this is just the basic grunts. And down at the bottom, it also shows, yeah, there's the key. We're just dealing with the most basic bugs, at least at the start of the map. We are, aside from those couple of bugs that we've taken out of the Swarm deck, anything can still spawn while we're on the mission. But at least at the start of the mission, we only have those basic bugs. Another thing that is on the map that we need to be sure to place during setup are these pit spaces. They're placed directly on top of the normal piece tokens. So for example, for this large pit, we would place that right on top. And likewise, we've got a smaller one that goes over here and bounces across those two. So I'm going to set up the map to look like what it shows in here, and we'll be back in just a moment. I have our board set up mostly complete at this point. We've got our stalagmites, our starting grunts, the randomly distributed collectible tokens that include the alpaca blooms and our loot bugs. The last thing left to do is we have our 5 morkite, which are these green gems. 5 morkite, we've got 2 gold, and the red one is called nitra. So we'll put all of those into a bag, and then we will place them in their positions. That's what, got a couple of bags just for that purpose. So we put 3 of these go alongside the left wall. So we've got a gold, 1 morkite, oh, got a rainbow over there. We've got 1 that goes in the top corner, nitra, and most of the rest are going to be a remaining morkite. Come on. My hand, do it 1 by 1. Okay, so most of the morkite we need in this mission is in the back corner of our cave. Yep, got all 9 in place. So we do end up needing to head over to the southernmost point in this cave to collect at least 1 of these nitra, or morkite. We've got a little bit of gold and nitra over there. So the green ones are our objectives, and the red and yellow ones will help us get more supplies and upgrades. And we'll explain how those go when we get to that point. So the map is set up, and now that that is complete, we can introduce our dwarves and start going over what the different actions mean. So first up, slide this over here, go over each of them in turn. So the first up is Engineer. His color is red. Let's bring them up to the camera. He controls turrets and has these nifty platforms. Our Gunner is named so because he's got a giant minigun. He also controls zip lines and a shield. We've got our Scout, who carries a sniper rifle, although each of them also has an optional secondary weapon. His other weapon would be an assault rifle. But they all still keep in line with character. He's got some flares. And in the back there, we've got our Driller with the big drill arms. He also carries a flamethrower. Each one of them starts with 5 health. You can see also on each side they've got ammunition in place. So each one of them has 5 primary ammo to start with, and each of them has 3 secondary ammo to start with. After they've upgraded their secondary weapon, they can put in all 5 ammo, but until they've upgraded that secondary weapon, it starts locked at 3. But you can see each of them also has a starting, really a primary weapon. The primary weapon doesn't change, but the reason it has that recess is so that if you want to use the alternate one, you can just slide it right into place. So the Engineer, for example, could use either the grenade launcher or the breach cutter. They'd have to choose before they come into the mission which one they want to use. We will go over what all of the special things mean, but just wanted to introduce the gang real quick first before we go next into the actions, and also so you know what's sort of going on over here on the right side. I think we can get into the actions now. Oh, no, one last thing is in the bottom corner here, you'll have numbers. Those are the difficulty levels. So like 1 would be the easiest, 2 would be harder, 5 would be the hardest setting. What that bottom track is a swarm counter. So the further to the left you start your tracker, that's basically the difficulty level. And the one just cut off on the edge there would be the difficulty level for 1, which gives you the most time until you hit your first swarm, which are what these lit up pieces are. In that corner, you can set your difficulty level based on how long before you reach your first swarm. You'll also see that there are a number of decks. Each of those has been shuffled, and we will get to dealing those out when we're ready to start the game. We are ready to begin. I've got the zoom camera set up, and we'll be using the scout for all of our little examples for how the actions work. What this cute guy is he's called the mule, and he's really just a cute container that you can store the resources as you pick them up during the game. He's not a gameplay thing, he's just neat, in case you're wondering what that thing off to the side is. Now, our very first action is a move action. Remember that on each turn you can take up to 3 actions. So if you use a move action, then you can move up to 3 spaces on your turn. So if you were to move just 1 space, that would take up the full action. You couldn't do a move action, then say shoot, and use up the remaining movement later. It's the whole action, no matter how many spaces you move, is used up in that case. So it's not like Imperial Assault, where the move action gives you a bunch of moves and then you can take them throughout your turn. No, in this game, the move action, you move up to 3 spaces at that time. So in our example here, we've got our scout starting in our landing pod, and he can move up to 3 spaces. Now, something that happens while you're moving, if you come across one of these little question mark tokens, as soon as you move next to them, switch back to overhead because one's hiding behind that rock. As soon as you move next to them, you'd flip it face up. And in this case, we have found one of the apocablooms that we're looking for. That happens automatically while you're moving. So you don't have to stop there to reveal it. You can continue your move and see, oh, okay, flip over what the next thing is. That's another one of the apocablooms that we're looking for. And then he could use his 3rd space of movement if he wanted. Or he could choose to stay there because he doesn't want to go right up next to the bugs. Some of the classes have unique features about their movement. The Scout, for example, because he's got a fancy grappling hook, and it's also listed on his ability sheet as a reminder, but because he's the Scout and he's got a grappling hook ability, he can move over pits or creatures. Normally those things would block your movement, and you would have to find some way around them, either digging through the walls to get past these pits, or in the case of bugs, you'd have to kill them before moving the space. They're just blocking like walls. So in the Scout's case, let's say he moved his full 3 onto the Apocabloom right there. In the case of these collectible resources, if it doesn't have any additional like pickaxe token or something on it, then you pick it up as soon as you walk over it. So in the case of our Scout moving his 3rd space onto that bloom, we have now claimed that, and that goes into our collected resources. I like to put them up by the top so I can remember them, just somewhere that we're not likely to dig into so that we can see. He used his full 3 movement. Because he's the Scout, he can move over these pit spaces. That's one of his unique abilities. So he could do a second move and go 1, 2, 3. His ability doesn't let him stop on the pits, but while he's still moving, he can move across them, as long as he doesn't end his turn on them. We'll go over what each of the classes can do special besides that. But the Scouts, because it's so integral to his character, thought we should introduce that during the movement tutorial. So 1 move action, 3 spaces of movement. Because I explained you can pick up the Apocablooms just by moving over them, I should find an example of one that doesn't, so you can see what they look like. Okay, so the loot bug has a little pickaxe symbol on him, and that means you have to use a different action called literally the pickaxe action to try to pick him up, to get resources out of the loot bug. Anything that has a pickaxe icon, you have to interact with before you can pick it up. Anything that doesn't have that pickaxe icon, you pick up automatically as you're walking over it. Other notes on movement, you can move through your allied dwarves, or if you're playing with Bosco, you can move through Bosco during your turn, but you can't stop in them. And I assumed it was obvious, but you cannot move through the solid walls on the side of the caves. Smaller things like the tokens are spaces that you can move through or stop in. The second action Also very important one is the attack action. So you can take an attack using either of your weapons. This is an example of a secondary weapon. But if we go over to all of their boards, each of them will have a primary weapon as well. We'll just put that on somebody for the moment. The weapon description says what the range of the weapon is. The number next to the little R, that's the range, counted in spaces away from your person. So in the example of our scout here, 1, 2, 3, 4, he could shoot at the space containing that collectible token, or any of the bugs that's in his sight. Now we do have to think about line of sight. When it comes to targeting in line of sight, I like to use the corner to inside system. So what that means is as long as you can draw a line from a corner of the hex that you're in, so for example, that corner, to the inside of the hex of your target without going through a wall or some other kind of blocking thing, you can draw a line from that corner to the inside of the hex that the grunt is in. But from this space, the wall would block, and you could draw a line that just touches the wall, but it can't go inside of the hex. It can only just touch the edge of that one. So just remember, from a corner, you need to be able to reach the inside of the hex of your target without going through anything that would block, like the outer walls would block line of sight, these stalagmites block line of sight. Most of the things that stand up that have miniatures would block line of sight, except for the grunts and like the engineer's turret. Just a couple of really short things. Almost every weapon needs line of sight. There's one exception that is inside of the rules. I wish it showed it on the card here, but the engineer's grenade launcher can basically shoot off of the walls, so you just need line of sight to the space, ignoring everything but the outside walls. Gives that instruction in the engineer's specific rules. It really should have that reminder on his primary weapon info. Line of sight rules can be really tricky in games. This is something I would encourage you to look at the examples in the book and try to get an idea of before you run into the game. Once you have somebody who is in range and line of sight that you want to attack, then we look at the weapons. The weapon we were looking at earlier is a very simple example of a weapon. In this case, if you are within range 4, you roll 2 green dice to try to attack the target. The number of dice, more dice means more chances to hit. If we look at some other examples of weapons, we've got the minigun. That one fires 3 green dice, but it also has a special ability. The gunner's main special ability is if he's using his minigun, he can continue to attack without spending more attack actions, although he still has to pay ammo. Notably, whenever you attack with a weapon, you have to use up an ammo of the corresponding type. So if you're using a primary weapon, you have to discard one of these gold primary ammo tokens. If you are firing your secondary weapon, you have to discard one of these blue secondary ammo tokens. And it's just discarded back to the supply. It's not lost. You can pull more of them from the resupply. You need to meet the weapon's range requirements, you need to be able to see your target, and then you roll the dice that it says. So green die is one example. The engineer's weapon has a red die. Each of the dice have different themes and different capabilities for damage. So let's look at some example dice right now. The green die is the most basic die. Either you hit or you miss. Each one of these dice have 4 hit sides and 2 misses, so every die is a 2/3 chance of scoring a basic hit against a bug. Each hit would do 1 point of damage. Second example of a die is the red die, which is explosive damage. Now this die has 3 of the sides have 1 hit, 2 of the sides have 2 hits, and the last side has this special marker, which is basically scares bugs. So if you roll this particular side, instead of killing or damaging the bug, you would instead make the bugs flee in any direction that you want by 1 space. The explosive die is considerably stronger than the green die. The green die is definitely the most basic die, but typically you get to roll a bunch of them when you shoot. Next up is the flame die, which is yellow. It represents the flame, naturally used by the flamethrower. You have 2 blank sides, 3 sides that have 1 damage, and one side that has 2 damage on it. It is just as likely to do damage as the green regular shot die, but it also has a chance to do some extra damage. Next up is what I consider to be the strongest die. The blue die is the armor-piercing die. Some bugs can have resistance to certain types of damage. Exploders, for example, have resistance to explosive damage. It shows any resistances on the information about... there's a list of bugs, so you can see what any bug has resistance to on their stat lines. But we can go over the bug stats in a little bit. Some bugs have resistance to certain damage types. Very, very few things have any resistance to the armor-piercing die. This die also only has one side that's a miss. It has 3 sides that do a single hit, and it has 2 sides that do 2 hits. I think it is very good. They're strong, but you usually don't get a lot of them. It's great if you can find them. There is also a die specifically for the pickaxe, and there are dice specifically for how the monsters attack. So in the example weapon we used before, let's assume that our scout has the Zhukov SMGs. Then he's going to get to roll 2 green dice. We'll put him back over here so he can see the bugs. He's going to roll the 2 green dice against these bugs. Now we do need to declare what our target is going to be before we make the attack, and we'll see why in just a second. But let's say he's attacking this one on the one end of the group. For the sake of this tutorial, we're going to say that I actually got 2 hits on that attack, just so that things will go a little bit smoother. Now, in the case of the grunts, if we just take a quick look at their stat sheet, okay, the green cube up on the top means that they have 1 hit point. R1 means they can attack at a range of 1, or melee. M3 means that they can move 3 spaces whenever they activate. So, grunts. 1 health, melee attackers, not a lot to them. And that means with our 2 hits, you only need 1 hit to kill the bug. And that's where we get into the concept of assigning hits. Because whenever you're shooting with a ranged weapon and you're applying multiple dice, you can actually assign each die in turn to a different bug, as long as you're going in a row. So in the case of our Zhukov SMGs, we can assign the first die to that bug, and we can assign another die to a bug that's next to it. And in this case, our attack could kill 2 bugs. Now, it does have to be next to the previous space, so we couldn't assign our other hit to the bug at the far end of the line. Let's say that instead of using the SMG, we had used the minigun, which has 3 bullets, or 3 green dice, and we could have rolled 2 hits and a miss. We can still assign the miss die, although the very first die we assign always has to be a hit. We have to hit the first target before we can start killing other bugs. It doesn't have to be a kill, just in case that first target is resistant to the hit, or it's not enough to kill it, like it has a bunch of health. You just have to assign your first hit to the bug that you were targeting with your attack. After that, you can go space by space, and we could assign the miss to the bug in the middle, and our other hit to the bug at the far end. So if you have a bunch of dice on the attack, you can assign the dice to the bugs just going in a line from 1 to 1. And this represents that you're using your minigun and you're shooting down the line as you go. So first hit has to be on the target. After that, you can assign the extra dice to the same space if you wanted, or adjacent spaces. And each successive die has to be adjacent to the last space that you assigned. In the case of some of the other dice where it has multiple damage on a single die face, all of that damage goes to the bug in that space. You can only assign these hits to bugs that are within your line of sight. It can be an issue if the bugs are all in a line behind each other, and let's say we were dealing with taller bugs that you couldn't just see through. So let's say we had this much nastier bug in front of the line of grunts. In this case, our scout, he can't see all of the grunts behind because the slasher that's in front is blocking line of sight to the other guys. So you could only assign hits to this big slasher guy because he's the only one you can actually see. All of the hits you assign have to be within line of sight. When bugs take damage that isn't enough to kill them, you can give them these little green cubes as reminders of how much damage they've taken. Damage token will move with that bug as they go through the level. You have to expend an ammo from the weapon whenever you shoot. If you are out of ammo, you cannot use that weapon. Preserving your ammo or knowing when to shoot is a valuable tactic to keep in mind. If a bug has been reduced to 0 health, you just remove it from the board. There's no experience tracking, anything like that. The benefit of killing the bug is having them not kill you. Throwables are actually the next thing in line. So at the beginning of every game, you shuffle the Throwables deck. They've got the little grenade pin, and each dwarf gets dealt a random throwable. Some of them can be damaging grenades. Some of them can be tools that help dig out tunnels. So here's a nice representative, like the incendiary grenade. This, like the grenade launcher, you just have to be within line of sight to the space, ignoring all figures' lines of sight, anything but the outside walls, the black spaces between the caverns. It's one action to throw a throwable. The one we looked at before is the incendiary grenade. It deals yellow flame damage, and it does an area of effect. So you only need to be able to target the space with the T, and then you can rotate its area of effect however you would want. And you would roll the 2 dice, and you would apply that much damage to every space that's hit. Here's another example, very famous tool. Normally, in the video game, this would only be a tool of the driller, but in the board game, this can be given to anybody. The satchel charge actually has its own special little reminder tile. So when you use the action to place the satchel charge, you place this somewhere within range 1. At any chosen time in the future, you can detonate it. You roll the 2 red dice and apply that to each space hit. So every space that is in or adjacent to where you lay down the satchel charge, it will destroy walls, platforms, stalagmites, open up more cave, and it will also deal the 2 red damage to anything in its damage area. It's a good weapon and as a tool to carve tunnels. Now, since it's deployed at range 1, you'll be within that range at the start, so you would also take that red damage. It would happen to each space hit regardless of friendly or not, so you have to watch out for that kind of a thing sometimes. And here's one more example of a more tool-based one. This one doesn't do damage. You choose a space within range 4 as your target space, and then in a straight line of 3 spaces from that space, dig out the walls. So you dig out 3 walls in a row. So this would be great if you had carved out an empty space right there. You could just put the tunnel carver right there, aim it that way, and dig out those spaces. And according to this card, any minerals that were in that spot are just dropped instantly to the ground, and you can just pick them up by walking over them in the future. The throwable cards do a really good job of explaining how they work, what types of damage they would do, if any. Each dwarf gets 1 at the start of the game, and it is 1 action to use your throwable. There are a couple of special cards that might gain you another throwable. There's no limit on how many throwables you can have. It's rare to get any beyond the one you started with at the beginning of the mission. Okay, the next thing we should look at is the pickaxe, your melee weapon. It takes 1 action to swing your trusty pickaxe, whether you're swinging it at a wall or at an enemy. It's just considered the pickaxe action, not a melee attack or a mine action. All the various things that you can do with your pickaxe. There's a whole bunch. The first one is mining, collecting those minerals from the walls. How do you do it? You roll for the pickaxe. That's where we get into the white pickaxe die. So there's 1 miss. That's right, somehow you can actually miss the wall. Maybe it was just a hard spot or something, and 1 swing didn't do it. There's also 3 sides have a single pickaxe result on them, and 2 sides have a double pickaxe result. For each pickaxe result you get when you swing the pickaxe die, you can deal 1 damage to a bug that is next to you, or you can mine out 1 wall. So if we go into our example here, if our scout is standing right there, he can use a single result to mine out that wall. And to represent that, we place one of these little single hex tiles there. And now our play area is bigger. You can also use that to mine your way around pits, which would otherwise be impassable to most dwarves. You could also use that single pickaxe result to deal 1 damage to the bug that's next to him. The grunt only has 1 health and no pickaxe resistance. That would be enough to kill a grunt. If you got that double pickaxe result, though, then you can use each one of those picks to do any of the things that you're allowed to do. So you could mine out the wall on one side and damage the bug that's on the other side. Other things that you can use with the pickaxe, you can use it to destroy one of these stalagmites. If you destroy a stalagmite, then you remove it from the board, but you also get to roll the mineral die. So we've got this neat little gold die here, and this one has an even distribution. We've got two sides that are just blank. We have two sides that have that represents nitra, which is the red mineral, and we have two sides that represent gold. So you've got a 1 in 3 chance of each result. If you manage to get a mineral from a stalagmite or even a wall with your pickaxe action, then you do immediately collect it. In the case of like that tunnel carver, it explicitly states that the resource drops down to the ground because you're not next to it to automatically pick it up. If you pickaxe a wall, you do get that mineral automatically. We've also got a supply of plenty more nitra and minerals, so we're not limited to what spawned at the start of the game. We can get more from these stalagmites. Another thing we can use the pickaxes on are some of these collectibles, like the loot bug. That's what that pickaxe mark means. If we use the pickaxe on it and we get at least one pickaxe result, we can assign it to the loot bug. Loot bugs, as their name implies, are just full of minerals. Whenever you kill a loot bug, you immediately get 1 gold, and you roll the mineral die, which means you may get another resource. You get at least 1, good odds of getting 2 minerals whenever you kill a loot bug. Some of the other things you can run across are, in some scenarios, you have alien eggs. Those are resources you need to pick up, but unlike the Apoca Bloom, you have to use a pickaxe to collect them because you're basically carving it out of the ground or the walls, as opposed to just plucking it out of the ground. So sometimes you need to use the pickaxe to collect those extra resources. That's it for the weapons. Next things that you can do from the action list is you can overclock your secondary weapon. So I showed an example before of the twin SMGs. One thing that you can do is you can spend 1 gold from your supply and an action to upgrade your secondary weapon into its improved form, which is the red side of each weapon. And it usually gains some kind of ability increase. This one also gets an extra point of range. It goes from range 4 to 5. The little 2 X's indicate that after you've overclocked it, you can store up to 5 secondary ammo. You no longer have the limit of 3 in place. And the SMG's special ability is if you don't get any hits when you make an attack, it doesn't cost you an ammo. You basically get that secondary ammo back. Another example, the burst fire gun is a secondary weapon that rolls all 3 green dice, but they have to be at the same target, no assigning hits to other folks. And its improved ability is for range. It goes from range 3 to range 5, which makes a big difference in terms of range. I'll just go over one more. The plasma igniter. You would roll 2 dice and you could pick the better result. It's a better chance, but you still only get the effect of one of the 2 dice at range 4. But when you overclock it, you get to use both dice. It's not a pick the better one, you can get just straight better results, and so forth. So you can overclock one of your secondary weapons at the cost of a gold. You cannot use nitra to overclock weapons. The next thing is resupplying. So a very important feature is how do you get more ammo if you have run out? Well, at the cost of 3 nitra, you can call in the resupply pod. You can call it in anywhere within your line of sight. This pod drops down, but you get to draw one of these resupply cards. Each one of these will have a different random assortment of resources. So in this example, this pod would come down and it would have 5 primary ammo, 6 secondary ammo, and 1 point of health assigned to it that you could interact with the supply pod to get those resources and put them on your character sheet. It's 3 nitra, which is the red mineral, to call one of these down. You can also substitute gold for the nitra, gold being the more valuable one, so you could do 2 nitra and 1 gold to call down a resupply pod. You would discard those minerals from your supply in order to do this call down. The supply pod has to be dropped down into an empty space, so unlike the video game, you can't use it to crush bugs. You can't put it on a stalagmite to break it or onto a pit. It has to be an open, empty space. So it is one action to call down the supply pod. It is also an action to exchange supplies. So if you want to pull supplies out of the supply pod, you use the next action, the exchange supplies action. And with that, you can take as many resources out of the pod as you can carry. You don't have to take everything in case you want to save like certain type of ammo for one of your allies who is just entirely out of that type. You don't have to take it all. You can leave some for the other player. You can also use the exchange supplies action, not just with the drop pod, but with dwarves that are adjacent to your space. So you can swap ammo between you at will. Oddly enough, the primary weapon that you put in the minigun is also the same primary weapon ammo that would go into the sniper rifle or the flamethrower. It's universal, it doesn't matter. You can freely exchange ammo, throwables, weapon upgrades, rock and stone cards with any adjacent dwarves. You cannot exchange health, and you are allowed to exchange supplies with someone that is knocked over or unconscious. As soon as all of the supplies have been collected from it, the supply pod leaves play. You can call down another one. Notably, you don't have to wait for the supply pod to be empty to call down a new supply pod. If you call down a second supply pod, you would draw another supply card from the supply pod deck, and the original supply pod would just be discarded. All the stuff that was on that one would just go away, and you would move the supply pod marker into the new position, you'd draw a new card, and only the new stuff would go into that supply pod. It's a brand new one. Everything from the old supply pod is just lost. But that's very useful if you've had to do a fighting retreat and you can't get back to the space where the supply pod was first called down. You can call down a fresh one in whatever the new location is that you need those supplies. The final action that we need to go over is called assist/revive. So there are two ways in which you can get knocked over. Either event cards, some of them will be like an earthquake. Everyone has to roll dice to see if they get knocked over. Some of the bugs have a special ability where if they roll the special result, they will knock a dwarf over. And when that happens, your dwarf is knocked over, but not unconscious. This status is simply called knocked down. So if you are knocked down at the start of your turn, the only action you can take is to stand up. It's a special thing. It's not in the action list. It's 2 actions to stand up on your own. But if there is another dwarf that is next to you, then on their turn, they can use the assist action. So for only 1 action point, they can stand you up, basically lift you back to your feet. If your dwarf loses all of their health, so no more of their starting 5 health cubes left, they are not only knocked over, but they are also unconscious. That's bad for a couple of reasons, but what's relevant right now is another dwarf can spend 1 action to get them back to their feet. So they stand back up, they're back in the game, and they get 1 health. Okay, the last thing that the game puts in the action list, it's not really an action, but it's something you can do on your turn, is using these rock and stone cards. So at the beginning of the game, each dwarf is dealt 1 of these. It's a one-time, awesome thing that can happen. So as an example, Fortune and Glory, double the result of a mineral die. It's fairly clear when you can use this. It doesn't have to be used on your turn. So if another dwarf has used the pickaxe, killed a loot bug, and they rolled gold or nitro or whatever, you could play this card, and it would double the result from that roll. I'm going to get some other examples in here. Nothing will stop us now. Choose another dwarf to immediately carry out a movement action, including any benefits, like the scout being able to jump over pits. It has to be on somebody's turn. You can't do this in the middle of the event phase for the bugs. At any time that you could play an action, you can play this card. Looking at the things that dwarves can do, there's one thing that we didn't go over going down the list because it's not really an action, but we referenced it during exchange supplies, is weapon upgrades. So the tutorial mission doesn't have any. It's something that gets introduced a bit later, but as we're explaining how to play, I want to show it. So some of the tiles that you can encounter in the caves are these random sort of equal-sided tiles. They look like this on the back, but there's a number of them. And it's basically a way to introduce a moderate amount of randomness into a mission. And many of these small spaces will have this token on it, which means that space would start with one of these little weapon upgrade tokens on it. Each of these weapon upgrade tokens can be placed into a slot on either the secondary or primary weapon. That's what this little star thing is for. It allows you to put your upgrades there. Each upgrade has a different effect and there's a spot in the rules that explains what they all do. This particular one, so if you place this onto one of your weapons, you roll an extra blue die whenever you shoot with that weapon. This one is enormously good. Another example one is this shield crossed out one. I believe that means that this weapon would ignore resistances. This one allows you to select one of the dice you just rolled for the attack, and you double that result. So weapon upgrades are all very good. I think like maybe the least useful one is it increases the range of the weapon. It's still a good benefit to have. So these weapon upgrades, you just have to walk over them and you automatically pick them up, and then you can place them right away into any weapon that you're carrying. The primary weapons each have 2 upgrade slots. The secondary weapons start with only 1, but if you upgrade the secondary weapon, it gains a second upgrade slot. The only point where we really reference these weapon upgrades is that you can exchange them between players. Now that we've talked about the different actions that your dwarves can take, let's take a look at what their special abilities are. First up, we've got the Engineer in red. His primary weapon, as we talked about before, is the Grenade Launcher, which it has 2 different firing modes, one of which is the AP grenade that's on the bottom. You roll 2 red dice and you can pick the better of the 2. Or he can use his High Explosive Grenade, where you roll 1 die, but it hits a 3-tile area, a little triangle, both of which have range 4. His alternate weapon, there's no need to unlock, it's just your choice between his 2 weapons. His other weapon is the Breach Cutter. So he can make a range 5 attack, a focused beam where you roll 2 yellow dice and you can pick the better one at range 5. But it also damages everything that's between you and the target. So essentially draw a straight line and it'll hit every hex between the 2 of you with that 1 yellow die. Or you can take a Plasma Blast at the space right next to you and you can roll a yellow and a blue die. So a very strong but very close range attack for that Plasma Blast on the Breach Cutter. Now his class-defining special ability is to use his Sentry Gun. You can spend 1 action and 1 ammo to place the Sentry Gun in a space that's next to you. So if we go up to the overhead, he can place his Sentry Gun any open space that's next to him. So the way the Sentry Gun works is anytime one of the bugs either moves or activates within range 3, it will get to activate and take a free shot. So it doesn't matter how many bugs are activating or how many move, it'll get 1 shot at each. The downside being that that shot is with the green die. It doesn't require any more ammo. It's 1 ammo to set down the Sentry Gun, and it'll just keep shooting. This is really great at locking down an area from those tiny little grunts, those swarmers, because it can take them out with 1 shot. Each green die is a 2/3 chance of getting a kill on one of those. You'll get 1 shot at any bug that moves through the Sentry Gun's area of effect. If on the next turn it activates again, you'll get another shot. So you'll get 1 shot as it moves into range, and then another shot when it's trying to attack. The Sentry Gun can be targeted by the bugs. It will only be targeted if there's no dwarf that's closer. In case of ties, a bug would choose to go after a dwarf before the Sentry Gun, but the bugs will go after the Sentry Gun. If a bug is attacking the Sentry Gun, the gun still gets its free shot on the activation, but the bug also attacks. So they could take each other out in that edge case where the bug is attacking the Sentry Gun. Sentry Gun, really great against the small, weak mobs, but it has absolutely no effect against those bugs that can resist a green die. They'll just ignore it, walk right up, knock it over, and keep moving. The Sentry Gun only has 1 health, so any amount of damage, even if it's like an area of effect thing from your own grenade, will take it right out and it will remove it. Even if the Sentry Gun is already placed on the board, the Engineer can use their Sentry Gun action again to redeploy it in a new location. The Engineer's second class ability is the Platform Gun. Using that, he can place these platforms over pits, which make them walkable. Just like any other normal space, it basically stops them from acting like a pit. The platforms, if you run out of them, you can just pick up another one from somewhere else and place down a new one. Each action allows you to place 3 platforms over pits anywhere within your line of sight. They don't have to be connected. It's apparently a very quick action to put out these platforms. So it's unlimited range and anything within line of sight up to 3. So that's the engineer's way of dealing with pits. Put down a platform and walk right over them. Okay, that's going to do it for our engineer guy. Now let's go on to another favorite class of mine is the gunner. Gunner very good at killing bugs. His primary weapon, the one he's carrying on his mini, is the powered minigun. It can shoot at range 5, 3 green dice, and the special ability that it has, if you want to keep firing, you can continue making successive attack actions, and it doesn't cost you more actions. You just keep spending ammo. So in theory, you could spend 1 action and shoot up to 5 times. He'd be out of ammo after that point. His other weapon is the autocannon. The autocannon shoots with a red die, doesn't shoot as many dice, but it comes with 2 firing modes. It has range 6, slightly more than the minigun, and a regular shot is 1 red die for 1 action. The second firing mode is continuous fire, which rolls 2 red dice for 2 actions, which may not sound like it makes sense at first, but it's essentially saving you on the ammo. So you're only spending 1 ammo to take the 2 shots for those 2 actions. And as we saw when looking at the red dice, it does have, like the worst case, when it doesn't do damage, it will still frighten bugs away. Every other side does damage, and it can sometimes do double damage. So the red die is a pretty good die. Now his special abilities are the zipline launcher and the shield generator. To use the zipline launcher, Gunner is standing next to a pit. He can spend an action to deploy his zipline. He has a total of 3 of these little tokens, and they stretch across from wherever he is to the opposite side of the pit, and that enables you to cross over the pit. So when you're using a move action where you can move up to 3 spaces, crossing a zipline counts as 1 space of movement, meaning that he could move 1, 2, continue moving past the zipline. So the ziplines not only cross the pit, but they go very fast across that pit. So 1, 2, 3, very fast. He has a total of 3 of them, so he could deploy like a zipline over there and also have a length of zipline over here. If he wants to redeploy and everything's deployed, he can pick up existing ziplines. You can't leave half a zipline across a pit. Those don't work. And he could continue deploying fresh ziplines with his total of 3 length of zipline tokens. That is how the gunner deals with pits. His second ability, the shield, uses this little shield token. For an action, he can drop that shield token in his space or any adjacent space, and that shield prevents bugs from moving into or attacking any space where that shield token is or any adjacent space to it. So in the case of the shield token being there, bugs could not move into the aura that it generates, and any dwarf that's within that zone is also protected. The shield token lasts for 1 full round. It would be returned to the gunner's supply at the start of the gunner's next turn. You can only use it once. In order to use it again, you have to interact with a resupply pod, and you'll get it back. The shields will protect you from like ambushes, like cave leeches. If there is a ambush that like spawns a creature, like a slasher emerges from the ground, the bug will still spawn, but it won't be able to attack the dwarf if that dwarf is within the shield. So the shield basically makes you invulnerable for 1 round in a small area. That does it for our gunner friend. The next one I'm going to look at is our friend from the tutorial, the scout. His emphasis is on mobility. His first ability is light-footed. He gets a free range attack after each time he moves. He doesn't have to stop, use a separate attack action. He just moves and he gets an attack action for free at the end of it. Notably, there's a special interaction for some weapons that you use might take 2 actions in order to make a shot, like his sniper rifle's aim shot. He cannot use any action that requires 2 actions as his free attack after a move. But still, a huge ability. Basically gives him double actions in terms of move and attacks. His other movement ability is the grappling hook, which we demonstrated a little bit during the movement section of the tutorial, which is he can move over pits or even creatures during his movement steps because he's got a grapple hook. He's going along basically through the air. But At the end of his move, he has to have a space that he can land on that third space of movement. You can't do, like, I'm going to do 2 move actions. He has to find a way to land on that third action and then grapple again with another action. His way of dealing with pits is going straight over them. Easily the easiest of the pit avoidance systems. His third ability is a very nice support ability. He has 2 flare tokens, and he can spend 1 action to place a flare token anywhere within his line of sight. It provides a 1-space aura, kind of like the shield, only instead of protective, it's offensive. The flare allows you to reroll 1 die whenever you're attacking a creature that is on or adjacent to the flare space. In my opinion, I think the scout is the easiest to play if you're just playing like with 1 dwarf, because he's very movement efficient. He doesn't have complicated special abilities like the turret or the ziplines or shields. So the M1000 Classic on his ability is a sniper rifle. So he can take a regular shot at range 6, 1 blue die. And if he takes 2 actions to take an aimed shot, slower but stronger, for 2 actions he can roll 2 dice at a range of 8, which is virtually across the map. His alternate weapon is the assault rifle, another very, very good weapon. You can fire it in burst fire mode. It always has range 5. So in burst fire mode, you'd roll 2 blue dice and you'd take the better one. Or for a cost of 2 ammo, he can go with full automatic fire, 1 action, and he rolls 2 dice. But notably, it doesn't cost 2 actions, so you could use that at the end of a move. The scout would be my recommendation for a first-time player, someone who wants fewer moving parts, fewer restrictions in place. Okay, and the last one that we're going to talk about, the 4th and final class, is the driller, as you can see by his massive drill mitts. In my opinion, his weapons have the most to sort of handle, so I wouldn't recommend him for new players, but it's really not that much to worry about. So his primary weapon is the flamethrower. It has 2 modes, fire haze. It's quite simple. You roll 3 dice at range 3, but the flaming ground one uses his special flame tokens, so it will deal 2 yellow dice of damage, but you'll also get to set down 3 flame tokens. So the flame tokens, when you're setting them down, the first one has to go on the space you targeted. So let's say we had several grunts out here, and he targeted this space initially. So you have to place your first flame token in that space, in the space you targeted, unless it still contains a creature. Maybe it was something resistant or something strong that didn't die with the attack. If there's still a creature in the space you targeted, then your first flame has to go into an adjacent space instead. After you've placed your first flame token, you can then place up to 2 other flame tokens on other spaces that are also within your range 3. So you could put a flame there, but not expanding out to the 4th space beyond. They have to be connected to each other, but you could put them on both sides of your initial target space. It doesn't have to go 1, 2, 3. These flame tokens, the beauty of what they do is they can block line of sight for the creatures, but not for you. So you can lay down these fire tokens as a wall that can block their creatures from advancing. You can force them to take the long way around to get to you. They can even block line of sight for those long-range web spitters that have a range of 5. They can't shoot over the flame wall because they can't see through it. It blocks their line of sight. If for some reason a bug has to move into that space, like say you put down fire tokens over a spawner where the bug basically appears in the fire, then the bug takes 1 damage and you remove the flame token from that space. Final notes on these flame tokens. You can choose to move through them. As dwarves, you take 1 damage per space that's on fire that you move through. That doesn't remove the flame tokens. Flame tokens expire on the start of the driller's next turn. Just like the shield tokens, they last for 1 full round and then they disappear. That is the driller's primary weapon, but his secondary weapon switches the thermal spectrum and is the cryo cannon. Now it goes to cold damage. It has a range 3, just like the other one, so he's relatively short range to the other classes. And the first firing mode is called Frostbite. It deals 3 green dice of damage, but it also has that special frost token. Any damage dealt to a frozen creature is doubled, but resistance is not ignored. The next time the frozen creature is activated, remove the frozen token instead of activating the creature. So Frozen is a great status to inflict on, say, some kind of special enemy, something that's tougher than your standard thing. Fire mode of the Cryo Cannon is Flake Storm. Free action, and you can freeze 2 adjacent targets. It doesn't do any damage by itself, so instead of dealing damage with your attack, 2 targets get frozen and also therefore stunned until the next bug activation. And the bugs don't activate during every event phase, so that might give you a couple of attacks on them while they're still frozen. Now, the Driller's other special abilities. He's a close combat specialist with those drill hands. He ignores all resistance against melee damage. Those flying Mactera with their double resistance to melee, this guy ignores that. He can attack them in melee. He's the only one who can. And finally, his awesome special movement ability is he can end his movement by walking into a wall, and that automatically will clear out that space. So if our friend, the Driller, is just somewhere over here, he can move 1, 2, 3. He ends his space, ends his movement in the wall space. It automatically gets mined out. So if there were minerals in it, he would just automatically pick them up as well. And that is now a open space. So he doesn't have to roll to drill out walls, although it does take up part of his movement. If he started next to a wall, it would just fully end his turn to move into it and dig out that space. He is the Driller. He drills. And so that's his special way of getting around the pits, is he's guaranteed to be able to dig through those spaces, even if it's a little bit slow. He goes around the pits instead of across them. So the Driller, fire, ice, melee. That's why I'd say he's a little bit more of a specialist. He does, based on what you've chosen to equip him with, some kind of really cool support ability. I think it would be a bit tougher to play with him solo. I guess he would be setting up Bosco for some really nice attacks. And so that is the Driller. And so those are our 4 classes. We've got the Engineer, Turret Area Denial Specialist, the Gunner, the specialist at killing the bugs, the Scout Movement Specialist, and also some fire support with those flares, and finally the Driller, who has awesome support and drilling abilities. I imagine it's meant to be played with no more than 1 of each class. Okay, that's it for the characters. Now that we have gone over what can happen on the dwarves' turns, you take your actions, you move, you attack, you mine. Now we need to determine how the caves of Hox's 4, the planet that we're drilling into, how it responds to our incursions. So for that, we have the event deck. By far the thickest deck that this thing comes with. So these are all of the random events that can happen at the end of each dwarf's turn. Notably, it's after each dwarf's turn, so that means that if you're playing with a full group of 4 dwarves, you'll have 4 of these events before your next turn. Normally, at the end of your actions, you would draw an event card, but if your dwarf is unconscious, like say the Engineer was just completely unconscious, instead of drawing an event card at the end of your turn, the swarm marker just increases by 1, which is pretty bad. Swarms are bad, but that's also your timeline towards just running out of time and losing the mission that way. These can have any number of effects. Some of them can be purely beneficial, like you trip over a piece of nitra, you gain a free resource and nothing bad happens. Those are pretty rare. Much more likely is you'll get something that will either spawn new bugs, one of the bug entrances to the cave that is, that's what these 1 and 2 markers are for, or it might activate the bugs. First, let's look at an example. Here's an example of one that is a choice for the player who drew it. Tough Spot. You spot a lost ammo crate that was left behind on an earlier mission. Unfortunately, it's surrounded by jagged, razor-sharp crystals. So, if you are not currently knocked over, you have to be on your feet to choose to do this. You can choose to lose 1 health to get to the ammo crate. Fully restock all of the ammo for 1 weapon of your choice. You can choose whether to interact with it at all. You can choose, nope, I'm good, and nothing happens. Another example. Volatile Creature. I sleeved them so they're extra reflective here. Volatile Creature. Increase the swarm threat by 1. If this didn't trigger a swarm, place an exploder at the exit closest to a dwarf. So I talked a little bit about this at the very beginning, but we've got a swarm tracker at the bottom of the board here. We've got all of these arrows that move towards the right. So when it says increase the swarm threat by 1, any one of these cards could say that, then you move the swarm tracker to the right by 1 space. And when it says if this didn't trigger a swarm, so whenever the swarm tracker reaches one of those golden highlighted spaces, that means triggering a swarm. In this card's case, if it didn't trigger a swarm, then place an exploder at the exit closest to a dwarf. So in this case, the number 2 is the closest to our scout. We would spawn an exploder bug on exit number 2. Go with one more example here. Here's an example that also deals with exploders. Don't go too close. This one just spawns an exploder at exit number 2, and it activates all other creatures besides the exploder that you just spawned. It's fairly rare for a bug to spawn and activate on the same turn, although there are events that do it, like a slasher bug ambush, for example. It can happen. Some of these things are bug ambushes. Other things that can happen in the caves are cave leeches. Anyone who's played the video game goes, oh no, yeah, those are in this deck too. I have found an example of one of these cave leech type attacks. So there are a handful of cards in the event deck that are an ambush. And when this happens, dwarves that are within attack range of your space each get a free reaction attack against the thing that's ambushing you, in this case, a cave leech. So that means this is an incentive for your dwarves to stay within line of sight of each other, because you can get these random ambushes, and if you can't intervene to help your friend by taking a shot with any of your weapons, also spending ammo, you have to have line of sight and be within range. And if you get one, in this example, one hit of any type, then the cave leech is killed and the ambush doesn't happen. Without help from a different dwarf, sadly you cannot help yourself in these cases, then it rolls 2 of the monster attack dice, dealing damage to you, and it rolls the exclamation point, then it knocks you down. In the video game, cave leeches just hold on to you until you are unconscious. So, the monster attack die. There is 1 blank result. There are 3 sides that have the monster damage token, that's the fangs, and there are 2 sides that have the exclamation point. So monsters, by default, 50% chance to do damage. The special depends on the monster. Grunts just don't do anything. They have no effect. Here's an example where the cave leech would knock you down. Okay, so those are a few examples of resolving events, but one of them was, well, what happens if you've hit one of those advance the swarm trackers and we get to one of those swarm spaces? Then we draw from this second deck that is just swarms. So looking at one example of one of these cards is grunts. Grunts everywhere. Place 2 grunts at each tunnel exit, and then also activate all creatures, including the ones that we just spawned. See another example. They got protection. Place 1 warden and a Mactera spawn at exit number 2. Place 1 grunt at all other exits. The warden is a special extra tough monster who gives all of the nearby other bugs shields, so they all gain damage resistance. And Mactera's spawn is like a flying ranged shooter bug. I'm pretty sure every swarm card ends with activate all creatures. So you're guaranteed an activation whenever one of these swarms hits. Now, how do creatures activate? So now to determine how the bugs take their activations, the bugs are very single-minded. They always want to attack you if they possibly can, and if they can't, they want to try to move to be able to attack you. In our example vignette here, we have 1 grunt who is already next to our scout. That grunt would be able to use his activation to perform an attack using his stats. The other 2 grunts are not close enough to attack, so their activation would be using their movement up to the movement listed on their stat block to try to get next to you so that on its next activation it can attack. The bugs cannot attack and move on the same turn. Some of the bugs have a ranged attack, so they follow the same line of sight rules as the dwarves do whenever determining whether they can see you to attack you. So they will attack if they can, otherwise they will move to try to get into range in order to attack. Let's introduce the hostile creatures of Hox's 4. the name of the planet that we're mining from. So first up, we've got the grunts, and there's a nice description over to the right, but I'll just read that part out. The most common enemy type in the caves, especially during swarms. Grunt attacks are purely melee-based. They're small, so they don't block line of sight. Range attacks can fire over them to hit a target on the other side. So what all of the stats mean is the first one is health. The R stands for range, so it's melee. And whenever it gets to move, it moves up to 3 spaces. It rolls 1 of the monster dice to attack. The monster die has 1 blank side, 3 of these bite sides for meaning deals 1 damage to the dwarves, and it has this special ability, of which there are 2 sides on the die. And the special ability for each of the different creatures is different. In the case of the grunt, because they're weak, most of the time you just ignore that exclamation point, unless you're playing on Hazard 5, the toughest difficulty, in which case the special action is to still deal damage. Okay, next one up is the Web Spitter. The Web Spitter is like the bug's sniper. They have 2 health, but they have 5 range, so they've got pretty long range for any of the bugs. They also can move 3 if they're not already in range when they're activating. They roll 2 dice to attack, so higher damage potential, and their special ability is they can inflict the webbed status on your dwarf. The webbed status means that you cannot move on your next turn. At the end of your next turn, you discard the webbed status. So it's a really nasty ability that keeps you in place. The only thing the web status prevents is movement. You can still do anything else like pickaxe or shooting or resupplying. You just can't move. But they're particularly nasty little buggers. Next up are exploders. You can guess what they do. 1 health, 1 range, but instead of rolling the monster attack die, they choose to do a suicide explosion if they can get right up next to you. And they will roll the red die, and they will damage every space next to them with the red die's results. They can take out other bugs with that. But notably, when you kill an exploder, they also explode, even if they didn't reach their target. So you can choose to make an exploder explode next to other bugs, and it will potentially take out other bugs as well. But they're nasty if you're in melee with them. Try to get out of range before shooting them if you can, because they'll still get that final explosion attack off. Okay. One note, because they're using the explosive die, one of the results is that scare result that makes bugs flee. It does not affect dwarves. Even if a dwarf is attacking with some kind of explosive result and you get the scare result, the dwarves cannot be scared by mere explosions. Next up is we've got the Mactera spawn. These are the flying bugs of this game, particularly annoying. They can fly over obstacles, including stalagmites, although they can't end their movement on them. Basically, they move like the scout does. And they have a ranged spit attack, range of 3. They've got 2 health of their own, and they can move 3 to try to get into range. And their special ability is they can stun a dwarf. Reminder that stun, if a dwarf is stunned, they only get 1 action on their next turn, so that can really suck. And they also have some resistances. So the Mactera spawn can resist up to 2 melee, which is all most dwarves can do. Notably, the driller ignores that resistance, so they can only be hit in melee by the driller. And they also have 1 resistance to flame damage. I forgot to note above that the exploder does resist explosive damage. I suppose they're used to it. Okay. And the last one from the front half of the monster board is the Slasher. The Glyphid Slasher is covered in sharp white growths for increased protection. It has a nasty habit of burrowing out of the ground before attacking, and they can knock over a dwarf with their crippling slash attack. So slashers are like the grunt's big brother. They've got 2 health. They still have 1 range and 3 movement, but they roll 2 dice in their attack, and their special can knock down a dwarf. A dwarf who is knocked down has to spend 2 actions to get back up. It's a bit like stunning, but if you're knocked down, any other dwarf that's adjacent to you can spend 1 action to help you back up to your feet. And the slasher also has some resistances. Fairly nasty set. They have 1 resistance to melee, 1 resistance to green, which is the most common regular die. It can be a bit tougher to whittle them down, and a resistance to flame damage. Okay, let me flip over the board and look at the other side. The second half of the board, you get into the larger, nastier creatures. And this particular one, the Brood Nexus, is more like a structure than a creature. It has no movement, it doesn't even attack, but instead the action it takes when it activates is it has the potential to spawn more grunts. It rolls 2 monster dice, and for each special result, you spawn a new grunt next to it. Those grunts don't activate this turn, though. And this pesky building has 5 health. It also resists 1 point of regular green bullets, and it cannot be stunned. The last note for the Brood Nexus is when it dies, it gets to activate 1 last time for free. A little bit like the Exploder, on death, it has the chance to spawn more grunts. Now, the Spitball Infector. This is like the Bug's version of a stationary turret. It has 5 health, 7 range, but no movement. So this thing has the second highest range of anything in the game. It can only be outranged by the Scout Sniper Rifle. And it has the ability to knock down dwarves on a special result. At least it only rolls 1 die on that attack. But it also has a whole set of nasty resistances as well. It can resist a normal green bullet, an explosive bullet, and a melee, and it also cannot be stunned. But notably, this is the first creature where knocking it over is considered such an achievement that you get a bonus rock and stone card for the dwarf that finished it off. And those are those beneficial event cards that you can play anytime you would play an action, or another dwarf would play an action. Those are nice. Next up, we've got Praetorians. These are the Bug's tanks. These things are pretty nasty, especially in-game, in the video game where you can have multiples of them. I don't think you can encounter that many Praetorians at once in the board game, thankfully. But they have 6 health. They actually have a range of 2. They've got sort of a spit attack that has a little bit of range to them, and 3 movement. Their special attack, even though they only roll 1 die, they can still do double damage if they get one of those results. And they've got a nasty set of resistances as well. Notably, they only have those resistances in the front. Their back, which you can't see in the picture, is like this giant bulb glowing weak spot. So as long as you are on the back half of them shooting at them, you can ignore all these resistances of melee double fire and 1 regular bullet. Notably, when the Praetorian moves, it always faces the nearest dwarf, which is also the direction it moved towards, because it always moves towards the nearest dwarf. So it will always position itself so that its resistance side is forward. And if you can kill a Praetorian, you also get a bonus rock and stone card. Now we've got the big brother of the Praetorian, the Oppressor. This one's quite nasty. It has even more health than the Praetorian, although just 1. It does not have the ranged attack, but he has a nasty set of special abilities, in addition to being super tough from the front as well. His special attack will not just do damage, but also knock the dwarves down, which severely impairs your actions. He has a whole bunch of resistances. Double resistance to normal bullets. He's the only thing that can resist the armor-piercing bullets because he's that tough from the front. And he also cannot be stunned. Thankfully, like the Praetorian, his resistances only affect the front half. And I need to read out his full entry, because he's also got some special abilities in here. The monstrous oppressor takes up 2 spaces on the board. When moving the oppressor, count its movement from its front part and always turn it so it faces the direction it moves in. As it moves, it will follow the shortest straight path to its target, and will crash through and destroy stalagmites, grunts, and cave walls. This thing can burrow straight through walls to get at you. Extra nasty. Any minerals contained within those walls drop to the floor. If the oppressor ends its movements next to a target, it performs a free attack. There is one special card that can maybe give things extra attacks. The oppressor does not get bonus attacks. The oppressor is equipped with thick front armor, but attacking it from behind allows you to ignore its resistance. The oppressor does not suffer double damage if an area of effect weapon hits both spaces. So your area of effect grenades are only going to hit it once, even though it takes up multiple spaces. So yeah, the oppressor is a nasty boss type monster that it'll go straight through the cave walls at you, and it will always adjust its butt so that it's facing you, and it can knock down any walls it needs to get there. And the last one, which may seem like a letdown after the oppressor, but no, it has its special abilities that make it nasty, is the Warden. The Warden only has 2 health. But how can it have a range 3 if it doesn't have an attack? Well, it projects a shield. So it does have some resistances as well, and I will read out its entry. When the Glyphid Warden activates, it moves towards the nearest creature. Not dwarves, it goes towards the other bugs. After its movement, if it is more than 3 spaces away from the nearest creature, you place 1 grunt next to the Warden on the empty space closest to a dwarf. It'll spawn things if there's nothing for it to protect. The Warden has no attack, but generates a protective shield around creatures within 3 spaces of its location. The shield cancels 2 damage per attack of any type. It'll just ignore 2 damage. Or the bugs that are protected by his shield, that is. Ignore 2 damage. When the Warden is killed during an attack, the protective shield immediately disintegrates, and other bugs can be damaged without the shield. So if you're doing something that rolls a bunch of dice and you're targeting the Warden, as soon as you've killed the Warden, you can start assigning hits to the other bugs that are next to it, and they've lost the shield at that point, even though it's part of the same attack. As long as the Warden dies first, the protective effects on the other bugs are lost. Okay, and the notable thing about the order that we went through, like starting with the Grunt and the Web Spitter, and then getting up to these bigger guys, is when you're activating the bugs, you do them by type in order. So all of the grunts activate first. I like to do the ones closest to 2 dwarves first, and then you go to the next type, and so on and so forth. And so that's why the Warden is last, because the Warden wants to track towards other bugs. It wants to wait for them to finish their movement, and then it goes towards them to try to give them that protective shield. So they activate one quick... got a big board here. Okay, so you've got the Grunt, the Web Spitter, Exploder, Macterospawn, Slasher on the one side. On the other side is the Brood Nexus, Spitball Infector, Praetorian, Oppressor, and the Warden. That is the order they activate in. Okay, we've gone over all of the bugs. Okay, and the last thing I think we need to cover are the game end conditions. So if we look over here, we've got our setup. The dwarves start on their matching spaces, so like engineers the red, gunners the green, they've got all their symbols. So each map has a defined starting configuration for the drop pod. Once the last dwarf has left the drop pod, it flips over, basically the drop pod leaves, and becomes just normal cave spaces, until all of the objectives have been reached. So after you've collected, in the case of the tutorial mission, all 5 of the Morkite and all 3 of the Apocablooms, then the drop pod will come back. So as soon as the mission objectives, like the collection, has been completed, or whatever the objectives are for that particular mission, that tile flips back over, it becomes the drop pod again. If there were any bugs that were in those spaces, they get crushed. Dwarves get knocked out of the way. Move dwarves to the nearest empty space next to the drop pod, and they get knocked over, the knocked over status. Okay, so the mission ends in victory when all of the dwarves have made it back onto the supply, or the drop pod. They don't have to be on their assigned color spaces, that's only for the start of the game. So once all the dwarves that deployed are back in the drop pod with the mission objectives completed, the drop pod leaves the caves back up to space and takes you to victory. Now, the way to lose is if all of the dwarves that you brought on the mission are unconscious, game over. One last way to lose the mission is the threat swarm tracker will move up over the course of the game. You get a swarm each time you land on one of the yellow spaces. If the swarm tracker is already on the last space and it would go up again, that is the other way to lose the mission. So there is effectively a timer. You can't stay super defensive the entire game. Of course, you'd also be running out of ammo if you went too slow as well. And bugs will keep spawning each one of these event phases as we go through the game. So there is effectively a time limit. And those are the rules for a regular game. If you're playing with only one dwarf, then you also get to bring with you Bosco. He's a little flying helper robot that also deploys alongside. If you are playing with Bosco, after your dwarf takes his actions, Bosco gets 2 actions of his own. Bosco can never be attacked. He never runs out of ammo. He doesn't block movement or line of sight, but he also can't pick up minerals or tokens. But he can use the following actions. So he has 2 actions as opposed to a dwarf's 3. He can use move to go up to 3 spaces. He's flying, so he moves like the scout would. He can move over creatures, dwarves, stalagmites, etc., but not end on them. He can use the pickaxe. So he can dwarf stuff, he can mine stuff up, but only dwarves can collect them off of the ground. He has a machine gun. He can roll 1 green die at a range of 3 spaces, pretty much exactly like the turret. Or he could use the rocket launcher. He can roll 1 red explosive die at range 4 spaces, but that uses up both of his actions. Bosco can provide support using reaction attacks. Reaction attacks are like if you get ambushed like by the cave leech, Bosco can help you out with that reaction fire to try to save you. He can revive you. If you become unconscious, Bosco will sacrifice itself to rush to your location and save you. So you stand your dwarf back up, receive 1 health, and immediately carry out your turn without drawing an event card first, but Bosco then would be destroyed, and you have to return him back to the box. There is a deep dive campaign variant, which I don't think we need to go over here. When I eventually do play a deep dive, we'll talk about those rules, but essentially it's 3 missions played back to back to back, and resources that you've collected carry over, along with like weapon upgrades and other things that you've collected. And that is it for all of the rules, I believe. Let's see. I think it would be fun to show off a couple of the miniatures just because we may not necessarily see them in a particular mission. So, the Praetorian, he really is a big boy. You've got Brood Nexus, nasty thing covered in its slime and tentacles, mid-spawn of a grunt there. Yeah, these are really, really cool miniatures. I definitely need to learn how to paint properly to do these things justice. And the Oppressor, even bigger than that Praetorian. He's huge, armored, but they've got that weak spot in the back that's common to the bigger bugs. So yeah, we've got some awesome miniatures in this game. And now I think we are ready to play. I have reset up the mission. After doing all of the tutorial bits, I have re-randomized all of the question mark pickup tokens. We didn't touch any of the minerals, so I left them where we originally randomly distributed them. I am going to play with all 4 of the different dwarves. I feel like this is the best way to give each of them a chance to show off what they do best. Also, it's the Greenbeard mission. We should be doing just fine in this one as well. I also randomly distributed secondary weapons. I believe you can choose like which weapon you want for each person. They do recommend that you have a mix of dice. So for example, someone shouldn't have all green or all red in case you come up with against a bug that has resistance to something, you're not completely out of luck with this one person. But because we've got at least all 4 of them here, I just went ahead and went random. Suppose I should show off those secondary weapons because we may not have seen them yet. For Scout, who will be going first, in addition to his sniper rifle, is going to be wielding the experimental plasma charger. Range 4, 1 red die, and if you overclock it, it does an area of effect attack. The engineer, who is going second, has the SMGs. We saw these during the tutorial, and if you upgrade those, then if you get a complete mist, your ammo is refunded. Our gunner, who's carrying his default minigun, will be taking the semi-automatic pistol. It's a free action to do one single green die, which is probably the one person, if I was choosing weapons, because he's already got green, that maybe I would have chosen something else, but there's nothing wrong with this weapon. It's a free action, meaning you don't even have to spend an action to shoot it. It's just the ammo cost at range 5. Maybe your minigun has missed something and you want to just take extra shots until it's dead. It's a really good backup weapon. And the secondary version of it, you get 2 dice instead, making it almost as good as the minigun. And again, with those free actions, our gunner is going to be going through ammo like gangbusters. Our driller is going to take his default flamethrower and also a stubby voltaic SMG, which has a little bit of lightning element to it, so it's got range 3, roll 2 green dice, but it also will stun any bugs that it attacks, or that you damage with it. It's effective against some of the tougher creatures that don't explicitly resist stun. And if you upgrade it, you increase the range up to 5. That's what they are taking with them. Let's go back to that overhead view. Hopefully things look okay. I'm seeing a little bit of glare on the right side. Let me tweak that. Okay, and we got all their tokens. Everything's set up. One other thing I'm noticing about casting this game that definitely makes me want to paint these minis a little bit better is when you're just looking at the overhead view, this just looks like a big blob of gray. And let's see, it's a little bit better on the zoomed in view here. That's why I've definitely got the zoomed in view enabled when we're on the overhead view. It'll be a little bit easier to keep track of things as they separate out from their starting positions. But we've got the scout up front, the driller standing right behind him, the gunner is the other one in the front, and the engineer is in the back. We have 3 grunts that start on the mission. Otherwise, it's empty. That's the other things about the map. We've got 2 spawning entrances for the bugs. We don't have any areas that are starting unknown. Sometimes you'll have like completely blank areas, and after you connect to them by drilling through the walls, you reveal them and spawn the creatures. But in this case, we have the other one is already known. We were able to scan it successfully, so when we dig through to it, we aren't going to spawn more creatures in it. It's just a known cave that isn't starting connected. So I randomly determined who's going first. This is going to be the turn order top to bottom, so we're going to be starting with our scout, who is a great person to start with because after they move, they get that free attack. And we've also got 3 of the pickup things right at the start that we could try to at least figure out what they are and maybe even pick up. So I'm going to do a move action up to 3. We'll reveal that first before we decide if we continue going. We have found an Apoca-Bloom. Yeah, we can keep going that way. I'll send the scout up this way, so he picks up the bloom, and we've got our first resource. Let's see. The game typically says that the logo up top is basically the contents of the mule, so you can keep your resources there to track what you've picked up. I think this awesome mule miniature that opens up and you can put your resources in, it's great, it's super cool. It's a little bit hard to get my fingers in to pull out an individual resource, so mostly I just let it look awesome off to the side. Okay, so our scout, his first action was a move 3. We've already got the first of our 3 blooms. Great start. And I moved him there because, let's say I don't quite have a ruler. I can use one of these things. So the straight edge there, you can just see the grunt on the far edge. So I'm going to be using his sniper rifle's regular shot to go with 1 blue die. And so I take off one of his primary ammo because he's using that for the shot. And that just goes back to the supply. 1 blue shot at the farthest one. So it's a double hit. I can't assign any dice, number one, because I don't have line of sight to the other bugs, because this stalagmite is in the way. A little bit more visible on the side, the zoom camera. Double hits, I have killed the first grunt of the game. Yay! Hopefully of many, many more. Okay, and that was one action. He still has two more actions. I want to investigate what else is underneath this other spot. So I'm going to move one. When you get next to it, you flip them over, you find out what they are. This one's a loot bug. So because it's got that pickaxe icon on it, let's bring it up to the zoom real quick. That pickaxe icon means that you can't pick it up just by walking over it. You have to use your pickaxe to mine it, in this case, to pop the loot bug and get all the juicy loot inside. So since I'm already in the middle of a move, I'm going to get another attack on one of these grunts. I don't want to stop right next to the exit. Sometimes because there's going to be 4 events before this guy goes again, you could have bugs spawn and then activate before he gets a chance to move away. Hopefully the other guys will bail him out, but often you spread out at least a little bit and it's hard for the other dwarves to support you. So I don't want to be right next to that tunnel exit if I can help it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here. So I only use 2 movement spaces. I'm not going to go all the way to the wall. And I'm going to take my no action cost, but 1 ammo cost. I'm going to take another regular shot at the closest swarmer. They're called grunts in this game. Those are 2 different things in the video game. Oh, another nice shot. So he's 2 for 2. And with his third action, I'm going to use the pickaxe. I position myself here so that if I get the double result, I can mine both the loot bug and remove the stalagmite, opening up the cave for my friends to see as they're coming after me. Behind me, I should say. So, pickaxe. Okay, I got 1. I have my choice of either popping the loot bug or getting the stalagmite. The loot bug has better odds of resources. So, I have collected the loot bug. And what that means is you get 1 gold straight off the bat. I've got my little resource bag here. So we've got a gold, and we roll the mineral die to see if we get any more. Nope, did not get any more. Okay. Now, I've just realized something that I made a huge mistake on at the very beginning. I did not deal out our starting throwables and rock and stone cards. My bad. Let's just get our starting cards. Our scout has the incendiary grenade. We showed this one off during the tutorial. It's a range 4, a small area of effect, and does 2 dice of damage. Let's see, where can I suppose I can put that right over their pictures. You know by the color which one it is. Next one, our engineer has picked up the electrocution grenade. Roll 1 green die and apply it to each target inside the blast radius. Regardless of the die result, they become stunned, and it also has a small area of effect. Next up, what does our gunner get for his throwable? He gets the phosphor grenade. Roll a yellow die and apply it to each space hit. Long range, large area. Doesn't do a ton of damage, though. Finally, for our driller, he gets the corrosive bomb. All targets inside the blast radius suffer 1 damage. No die roll. Which means this thing is obscenely good at clearing out grunts. It will just hit every single one. There's no chance, like that phosphor grenade, that it gets the blank result and you don't do any damage, versus the possibility of getting 2 damage. This one does 1 damage in a large area. That is a very excellent, very reliable grenade. So they've all got their throwables, and I also forgot to deal out their rock and stone cards. So our scout gets None Can Stand Before Us. Move a mobile creature 1 to 3 spaces. You can't choose a creature with a starting health of 5 or more. So you can make any creature you want, as long as it's not one of those stationary ones like the Brood Nexus or a giant one like the Praetorian. So basically make a small bug move under your control. Next up, the engineer will get Rock Solid. Deal 1 additional damage when attacking a creature. That's great. You can play that on other players' attacks as well. So if something is almost dead, you can make it dead. The gunner gets Lock and Load. How appropriate. Give 1 ammo of both types to another dwarf. So he can't give it to himself. And finally, our driller gets, look what I found. Look through the Throwables deck, give any throwable to another dwarf, then shuffle the deck. This is extremely good. You can pick any throwable you want and give it to another dwarf. That would be huge in certain situations. You've got different types of grenades, or maybe like the Tunnel Carver. That is an amazingly good card because it gives you a huge amount of choice. But you'll notice a common theme in all of these is that it says give it to another dwarf. So it's definitely very team build focused. If you are playing solo, you can ignore the another dwarf thing and just give it to yourself. I should have dealt all those things out at the start of the game. I'm sorry about that. Thankfully, it didn't change anything. I've set all those cards up on top of their other spaces. Hopefully we can still see everything decently enough. Still a amount of shine on that side. Let me see what I can do. Okay. Tweak the lighting yet again. Hopefully this should look a lot more readable on both sides. So that was the Scout's 3 actions. That's his turn. So now we draw the first event of the game. And hopefully, yeah, I think that's readable. Collapsing floor. The floor gives way below you. Roll 2 monster dice, ignore any damage result, but if you roll any of the special result, you get knocked over. You accidentally uncover a piece of lost gear in a cave pocket below you. Take a random upgrade token. I wasn't expecting us to get any weapon upgrades in this one. Let's see, I showed off a couple of them. But yeah, we've got, well, a little baggie of them. I'll put them in my random rock and stone bag, and let's see what we pull out. Didn't even prepare them, because we didn't have any, normally you only find weapon upgrades in the unknown caves. So we've got one random weapon upgrade. Ooh, so he's got, well, I use this one as the example of, yeah, this one's still okay. This is the range +1. So he can immediately put this on one of his weapons, and then that weapon now has a range 1 higher. But he's already got the sniper rifle, so I can improve his range 6 to range 7. Yay. But I'll put it on his secondary weapon, so that that range 4 goes up to range 5. But that might be the kind of thing that I want to exchange over to another dwarf, like, say, the driller, who typically has much shorter range things like the flamethrower, might get a little bit more use out of that bonus range. So I do need to roll his monster die. Where did I put the other one? Found it. Okay, so we roll the 2 dice. If we get an exclamation point, I got double. Well, he only gets knocked down once, but our scout is now knocked down in his space at the end of his turn. No damage, at least, and he got a random upgrade for his trouble, so not so bad. But now we need to get another dwarf over to him to help him up. Otherwise, he's going to spend most of his turn just standing back up. Oh yes, I put it on level 2 to start. That's where the swarm token is, 1 right of the leftmost space. Okay, that was the scout's full turn. The bugs didn't get to do anything. Now it is the engineer's turn. Okay, the engineer is in the very back. Because of where the scout is, it's going to take 2 full move actions to get to him, and no matter who does it, and 1 full action to stand him back up. So someone's going to pretty much be spending their turn moving to get into position for a future turn, but also helping him up. And in the case of the engineer, honestly, that's exactly where I want to put him. If I have the engineer here, I can have him set down a turret somewhere in the middle there, and that turret can protect from cave entrance 1 or 2, depending on if I get those pesky stalagmites out of the way. And it can take free shots, and it can help sort of cover us as we go into the back cave. It'll take care of the weaker bugs that are spawning as we go. So I think I am going to send the engineer straight out there. So 1, 2, 3, 1. We've gone next to it, so we'll reveal what it is. It's a second bloom. Okay, 2, 3. There's no attacks of opportunity. The bug doesn't swipe at us as we go by. So he's done 2 full move actions, and he will spend 1 assist action to set the scout to his feet. So he doesn't have a spare action to put down his turret this turn, but we will be able to set that down on the next turn. Because he's not next to the bug, it's going to be at least 2 activations before the grunt that's still on the board could attack him if he got a chance. Now we draw an event for the engineer's end of turn, and we've got, a slasher emerges. Place a slasher on an empty ground space adjacent to you, if possible. Dwarves within attack range of the slasher each receive a free reaction attack against it. If it survives, it attacks you. Okay, we have been ambushed by a slasher. So an empty ground space adjacent to you. I think you get to basically choose. Now, if I put him here, the gunner could take a shot at him. We've also got the scout right next to us. So I believe that the gunner can see that space, even if it's just barely past this stalagmite. But yeah, there's a straight line you can draw to the inside of that space. In one of these cases where you're dealing with reaction attacks, you go in turn order. So the gunner would be the first one to get a reaction attack, and if that slasher survived, the driller doesn't have line of sight and he's not in range of these weapons, but the scout would get a shot at him as well. And then if the slasher is still alive, it gets to take a free attack against my engineer. Gunner first, we're going to roll with that powered minigun. And that's the 3 green dice. Now, because this isn't an action, you don't get to use the powered minigun's ability to just keep shooting. It's not the gunner's turn to, forgo doing other actions. It's just one action, one shot against the thing that just spawned. So we are, gotta remember to expend that ammo. That's something that's really easy to forget, and it's very important for the balance of the game. So 3 dice. We got all 3 hits. Now the slasher, referring to its board, it's on the bottom here. It has 2 health and it resists 1 green damage, so we needed all 3 hits to kill it. But our gunner did a great job. I was hoping that the scout would be able to finish it off, but no, he got it in 1. So the slasher is now gone. Our gunner did a great job covering us, and that resolves the event. It did not survive, it does not attack. Okay, now it is the gunner's turn. Let's see what we want him to do. Well, we definitely want him to take his free shot at that bug, because his secondary action, you don't even have to do a first attack action. You can just shoot that bug, and he's already within the range of 5 of that thing. So we can just roll a green die up to 3 times until it's dead, just to get this thing out of our way. And he got it in 1. So we've spent one of his secondary ammo, and he shot this bug. So now, at least at this moment, we are free of bugs. And because of that secondary weapon's ability, it didn't take an action to do that. So which way do we want to go next? In terms of the 2 side caves. This one, we've got a pit and the potential for more spawns in there. This one is more of a, depending on how you dig the tunnels, the bugs are going to take those same tunnels to get behind you. Where do we want to move this guy? Well, the driller is the one who can easily just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 go into that room. So I think I'm going to send the gunner towards this side. Unfortunately, it's not an even number, because his first move just gets him to there. You have to be adjacent to the pit to put your zipline across it, but I think that's the best thing to do. In fact, I'm even going to set this up. So 1, 2, 3, he's picked up our second bloom. Well, he only moved 2 there, but he'll stop there, and he'll use his third action to set a zipline going across the cave pit, going that direction. You can check out what this thing is. We've already uncovered 2 of the 3 blooms. The last one is in one of those 2 locations, but we still have to go down this corridor just because we need to collect that Morkite at some point. So I might as well have the gunner move down there. The gunner's also in a great position to cover, provide covering fire for things that spawn pretty much anywhere. I should probably just have him mine out that one space. Or maybe I can have the driller do that. That way our gunner can just see pretty much anything. But that was our gunner's 3 actions. Now it's time to see what the next event is. We've got They Go Boom! Activate all creatures, but there aren't any, so nothing happens there. If no creatures are in play, place an exploder at exit 1 instead. So we get to see our first exploder mini. They're covered in nasty boils, ready to go pop. And it goes at exit 1. So remember, when these things die, they explode automatically. So you want to kill them before they get a chance to get right up next to you. I think they would be smart enough to try to... They go towards the nearest dwarf. Would they be smart enough to try to target multiple dwarves? If I use Gloomhaven rules, they would be. There are also dumb bugs. I'd say that's up to your interpretation on how you want to do it. I would go with the difficulty of, yeah, they know they're going to blow up. That's what they're trying to do, so they would try to hit as many as they could. Okay, that was the Gunners event. So now we are up to the Driller. So yeah, the Driller, he can move his 3. He could just end in the stalagmite and automatically mine it out, just like the cave wall. So we've removed our first stalagmite from play, and we roll the mineral die again. We might get something. This time we got a gold. So we now have our second gold. We could spend those on either resupplies or weapon upgrades. That was his first move. It occurred to me after I had the gunner move that, yeah, if I just have the driller move to that space, 1, 2, 3. Great, as soon as the driller's out of the way, the gunner can see space number 2 as well. Yeah, I'm not really having the driller help them over there with the exploder, but I'm having the driller do what the driller's best at, so it's okay. We also have tons of health, and it's a lower difficulty. I don't need to micromanage this. So we'll have the driller take his last action. We'll go 1, 2. We'll find out what this is. Ah, it's a loot bug. Okay, now I can, with the driller's last movement, we'll just put him straight onto another stalagmite. So he used his drill ability every single time on this turn. Got some free drilling, and we've got another gold. Well, we could call down a resupply right now using a very expensive substitution if we wanted to, or we could overclock 3 secondary weapons. We're in a pretty good spot right now, aside from that one exploder over there. And we're all set up to just have our driller go straight for that Morkite as quickly as possible on our next turn. That's great. But it's time for his event. What have we got? It nearly got me. Choose a ground space adjacent to you. If it's empty, place a stalagmite on it. If it contains a creature, don't place the stalagmite, but deal a damage to the creature instead. So a stalagmite nearly got us, and it seems like we can place it wherever we want, next to you. And the swarm threat increases by 1. Okay, we've gotten pretty lucky with not a ton of swarms and spawns at the beginning. If you can get some great momentum going, then that can definitely help you succeed in a mission, but it can also let you get separated apart and may make some of those ambushes get to you. But that's the driller's for full turn. We are back up to the scout. The scout's turn begins. He's got this really pesky exploder right next to him. He probably wants to deal with that. He also, because he's not a digging expert, he cannot simply run through this solid wall. If it was a pit, he could jump across it, but that's floor-to-ceiling solid walls he can't simply run through. This is the downside of stopping short of the wall from last time. He has to spend an entire action just moving up next to the wall. I think it would be a good idea to break through to that room somewhere over here, because then our gunner has the best vantage point to shoot pretty much anything. So we are going to go down to there, and then we will take our automatic, the scout's free attack after movement action with our... No, we do need to do the sniper rifle because the exploder would be resistant to the red die that the plasma charger would do. So we do need to take that shot with our sniper rifle again. We've used up his third ammo. Notice that he burns through the ammo like crazy with that free attack after movement. Let's see what he does against the exploder. Getting very lucky with the dice on this one. So the exploder explodes. There's nobody next to him. He doesn't dig out cave walls, and anyone next to him would have been hit by red die of damage, but we are keeping the bugs very much under control right now. That was the scout's first action. Second action, let's go mining. Let's try to get out a cave wall or two. We got 1. Okay. We have mined out the space right in front of the gunner. Now the gunner can see into that room as well. They can see both spawns, at least if our scout wasn't directly in the way right now. And now I think this would be a good time to swap some ammo around. Or rather, instead of the ammo, the extra range token. He doesn't even need it. Neither does any of them, really. Let's instead just run into the room. 1, 2. Let's go here so we're not blocking the gunner's line of sight, and we'll see what this is. That is the last bloom that we need to collect. Excellent. Okay. As soon as we've walked across that, we'll have collected half of the resources we need on this mission, but we still need to collect all of the morkite that's in these walls. He's done his 3 actions. It was a movement, a dig, and then an additional movement. What do we have in response? We've got a sticky spitter. Increase the swarm threat by 1. The next one will be a swarm. Come on, there we go, camera. If this didn't trigger a swarm, place a web spitter at the exit closest to a dwarf. So our web spitters. These nasty-looking ridge-backed guys are the Bugs Sniper characters. In this case, it's pretty much a tie. We've got someone who's 3 distant from Tunnel 1. This one is 3 distant from both the gunner and the driller, so let's put him there. That is the closest space to a dwarf. Okay, so these web spitters attack at range up to 5, and their special result will web you down so you can't move on your next turn. So those guys are pesky. They can also do a lot of damage because they roll 2 dice. So that is a threat. Now we are over to our engineer's turn. I wanted the engineer to be able to just set down the turret. That said, maybe I want to put the turret down next to where the engineer or the gunner is. Yeah, the engineer wants to shoot him. Figures now switching that 1 range over to the engineer would have let the engineer hit that web spitter, so oops. Let's see. Does the web spitter have... Nope, no resistances. He has 2 health. Where do we want to put this turret? I think that's a good spot for us to have it end up being. So it feels really dumb to move in front of the gunner. But, oh, that's right. The engineer, because they've got the grenade launcher, they don't need the direct line of sight. They can go, as long as it's not blocked by a wall, they can shoot it and sort of bounce it over stalagmites or like above your allies. So put him back where he was for a second. I could put him over there. He could see it. It would be nice if I was over there, because then I could go towards the other cave. I could still see and shoot him. You know what? This is a compromise move. So we'll move him there. We're going to take at least 1 shot at our web spitter. So we'll use his secondary fire mode, the armor-piercing grenade. It doesn't do area of effect, but there's only 1 bug in that mode. So we would roll 2 red dice, and we would take the better result. So we've got a chance to get that double result and maybe kill this guy. Always remember, expend that primary ammo. They're both single results, so we have dealt 1 damage to the web spitter, but it is still alive. Now the question is, do we put down a turret, or do we shoot again? I think we shoot again. It's better to have no bug on the board than have a turret maybe killing bugs in the future. So, exact same attack again. We'll take that armor-piercing shot. Come on, there we go. Okay, well, now I've got the double damage result. So we have, that's a damage marker for the bug, a little green cube. Okay, we have killed the web spitter. It did take all 3 of our actions to get in position and then take the shot, though. But that's okay. Now we get the engineer's event is mission-specific event. So every mission is going to have a line as to what this does. In the tutorial, it's a glyphid grunt nest. Place a grunt at each tunnel exit. So we spawn one of the little dudes on each one of those tunnel exits. They don't activate at this time. That's it for the engineer's turn, and now it is the gunner's turn. And the gunner has a couple of things that he can shoot at. Let's do so now. We're going to use the powered minigun this time because then we can hopefully have his couple of extra actions afterwards that he can use to either move into the next room or just chill out. Maybe we'll call in a resupply, or he'll overclock that extra weapon. So, minigun attack. We're going to attack the one on cave entrance 1 first. Well, he definitely got it. So, first grunt down, expended primary ammo. We'll use the powered minigun special ability to make a successive act as a free action. Still takes ammo though. And we're going to attack the grunt on the far side of the cave. Well, last one missed the dice roller, but we still got plenty of hits. And we don't shoot enough dice to chain fire all the way across to the other side of the cave. Okay, that was one action, 2 different shots, and now he still has 2 actions remaining. I definitely think we should, since he appears to have a whole bunch of extra time right now, we're going to overclock his secondary weapon, using one of the gold we've acquired to do so. Now he's got 1 action left. I don't want to put down a shield. I don't really want to move him very far. I could move him a little bit. We've got the zip line. I don't want to put him onto the far corner of the cave, but maybe we can move him back a little bit. Right now he's in the way of where I want to put that sentry gun down. That said, he's got range 5, so even if I moved him there, he could hit both of those sides. Maybe he can take out the stalagmite. So we'll move him a couple of spaces over to there. That is the gunner's turn. It's time for the cave. Fast critters. Increase the swarm threat by 1. And that means we're going to get a swarm as soon as this finishes activating. Oh, if this didn't trigger a swarm, all creatures move and attack. Okay, so the second thing doesn't happen. Instead, we are now drawing our first swarm card. What have we got? We have Web Spitter. Place 1 Web Spitter at exit 2 and 2 grunts each at exit 1 and 3. Then activate all creatures. Okay, exit 2 is right where we had it last time. And 2 grunts at exit 1. The first one's on the space. The next one is the closest space towards other dwarves. Hello, Felix. Please stay back from... Oh, no. Stay back. I've got to fend off a kitty. So we've got those 2 grunts. Sometimes we could have an exit 3, but we don't in this mission, or we would have gotten another couple of grunts. There we go, Felix. Or you can just go down. Oh, okay. Felix took a nice walk across the table there. I'm sorry, but you're definitely stepping on stuff. Okay, we still need to activate all creatures. So we start with the grunts, then we'll do the web spitter. They are not in a position to attack right now, so they will move towards the closest dwarf. The second one cannot get into a space next to a dwarf, so he has to keep moving to try to get to one. Okay, and that's just using my system of always move the ones closest to a dwarf first. We were in the middle of the creature activation phase when Felix decided to interrupt. Hopefully he will stay put for a minute. Okay, we've got our web spitter here who still needs to choose someone to attack. It's typically the closest dwarf, but they are both the same distance away. Be fun. Down there. We'll be back up in a minute, probably. Okay, so to break the tie, the creatures target a dwarf that most recently took a turn. This is the end of the gunner's turn. So the engineer most recently took a turn, the driller is up next. So our web spitter is targeting the engineer. But we've got our 2 monster dice. Okay. Felix will hopefully leave us alone for a little bit, and again. Web spitter is attacking the engineer. They've got 2 dice on their attack. He does a damage, and he has webbed our engineer. Our engineer has taken the first point of damage for anybody, and he gets a little webbed token. He cannot move on his next turn. Okay, that's it for our creature phase. Now we are on to our driller. Now our driller has some pesky creatures to deal with. Those creatures are in range to attack his friends, although notably the grunts are a bit out of his range being 3 even for his secondary weapon. He could throw his corrosive bomb but with the area of effect it's got, it would hit either of his allies. But we can take a shot at this web spitter who has no resistances. We could try to either kill it or surround it with flames so that it can't attack anybody, no matter how many times it tries to on the next couple of turns. Well, it's at range 3. We could also stun it using our stubby voltaic SMG, which would give us our free actions. Confirmed in the rulebook that if you've got a stun effect on your card, you do have to assign at least one hit for it to apply the stun effect. Just making sure, because Gloomhaven, that's a bit different. You can still stun someone if you miss your attack in that game. So in this game, you must hit to get the stun. So because of that, I'm going to go with the Flamethrower, hit them with the Fire Haze, which is all 3 yellow dice. Okay, yep, range 3, we are in range. Let's just try to kill this guy straight up. Oh yeah, we got 2 of the double results, no resistance. The web spitter is cooked, and that took 1 of our primary ammo. Goodbye, web spitter. Okay, now our driller has 2 actions left. Now we have to recover that 1 Morkite, regardless of what else we're planning to do. So, our driller down this corner. We're going to start by using his special ability to simply walk into walls with his drills activated. And we're going to go straight into that Morkite space and collect our first piece of Morkite. And that's in there with our 2 remaining gold. And he's got 1 action left. There's some gold right next to us along with Nitra. I think that would be great to try to pick that up if we can. To get us some supplies later. We're definitely using up our ammo at a decent clip, so we're going to need more of that soon. So I could just have him walk into the wall and guarantee us 1, but we've got a better chance of getting a double pickaxe than missing it by using the white die. So his last action, we're going to see if we can mine both the gold and the Nitra next to us. Well, we just got 1. So we have mined out the wall with the gold. Might as well get the best single result we can. And now we've got enough for a resupply again. That was the driller's last action, though. Time for our next event. We've got Gun Inheritance. You spot a gaggle of glyphids chowing down on one of your former colleagues. Among the carnage, you notice a shiny gun. So optional, if you are not knocked down, you can replace your secondary weapon with a new overclocked one, fill its ammo to 5, then increase the swarm threat by 1. So if you increase the swarm threat, you can just choose a new overclocked secondary weapon. That is pretty sweet. The stubby voltaic SMG that he has is not bad, but if you can get a free overclocked of your choice, that's just huge. And right now, we have not hit a lot of swarm threats so far, at least not in the early going. I am willing to take that risk to try to get something really good out of this secondary pile. So other ones that we may not have seen, burst fire gun, same target, 3 dice. The Bulldog Heavy Revolver is a secondary weapon that shoots a blue die, or when upgraded, blue die and a freeze effect. That's really, really good. We saw the Plasma Igniter, which upgrades into using 2 yellow dice, but we're already doing that. Ooh, the Boomstick. Roll 2 dice and you get the better of the 2, but it only has a range of 2. And when upgraded, you just get to roll 2 blue dice at range of 2. Our biggest problem right now is that we're short range. My personal favorite of the different secondary weapons is the auto shotgun, the Warthog. It, on its regular, shoots a blue and a green at range 3. If it's upgraded, it shoots a blue and 2 green at range 3. Now, if this were anybody else, I would happily take this Warthog shotgun, but we're already sort of stuck at the range 3, which is an issue for us because, this guy's just really far apart. He tends to stick to the cave wall. He's not in the middle where he's got lots of good lines of sight. I think we have to take the Bulldog Revolver, strictly because it's got the range 5. It's also a really good gun just by itself, especially when upgraded, and the event allows us to fully stock it up to 5. this poor ally who fell had a fully stocked, nice handgun when he got swarmed. Okay. So yeah, that is a very nice gun, and now it is fully loaded. Range 5 blue dye that also freezes. That's a good weapon. That was the event for our driller. Now we're back up to the top with our scout, who has just entered the next room. Now, unfortunately, because this is the big pit, moving 3 spaces, we can't cross it in one turn with our scout. So it's going to take us 2 actions to get all the way to the back, but then we can just start pickaxing with the scout. We don't need to wait for the driller to arrive. That said, it is getting a little bit far from our support for the other guys. It might be a better idea to maybe pickaxe open another wall there, try and take a shot at the grunts that are back there. Sort of give yourself nice open lines of fire to protect each other. I could probably easily send the scout out to this corner and start mining, but I'm worried about like the slasher surprise attack. Or some bugs that just, at the end of his turn, he gets ambushed, and then because we've got a full 4 dwarves, anytime we would get a creature activation, that creature could then attack him again. So the ambushes are not just bad because of the immediate attack, but also the add-on ones that they can get for the full round of 4 before your guy gets to respond. So with a group of 4, I'm hesitant to send 1 dwarf on their own off into the corner. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to roll the pickaxe, see if I can get one or both of those caves opened. That way I can at least have these folks protect each other. So, pickaxe. We got 1. That's all I really needed. I didn't need to, would have been nice. But now we've got a nice opening, and it now kind of looks like one big cave. So that was action number 1. Action number 2, now that we are a bit more open, I can send our guy to pick up the other Apoca Bloom. We've got all 3. First objective completed. And he can take his free secondary attack. I'm definitely going to use the secondary this weapon this time because he's starting to get low on primary ammo. So he rolls 1 red die. His range is increased to 5, so I could hit. I might as well hit the one that's already right next to my gunner because he's threatening him right now. So red die. In the worst case, I can still scare the bug away from our gunner. So this really can't miss. Hey, we got a damage. So the bug next to our gunner is now gone. We have protected. Now, if I wanted to send our scout out to there, I'd be out of range of the gunner and just out of range of our engineer. That part stinks. Yep, and I can't have moved next to the wall or I couldn't have shot at that first guy. No retcons there. I could stay put and but let's just stay put, take another attack at the remaining grunt, another point of secondary weapon ammo, and 2 damage. That grunt is very, very dead. I think it really helps to just reduce the population of bugs to 0 whenever you possibly can. That way, when more creatures spawn, it's not a horde, it's just the new ones you need to deal with. So that was the engineer's full turn. He got a couple of secondary weapon attacks and widened our cave. Now it's time for his event. Okay. They're closing in. Increase the swarm threat by 1. We're now 2 away from a swarm. If this didn't trigger a swarm, activate all creatures. But there aren't any creatures to activate. We got them all. So it is the engineer's turn. Now our engineer is webbed in place, which kind of sucks for him. He also has no one left to attack right now. But he has a couple of things he can do. I've been wanting to do this for a bit. Let's use his his special ability to deploy a sentry gun. Now, I was trying to find in the rules. I even looked on the online frequently asked questions about this, and it just says spend 1 action and 1 ammo to deploy the turret. I've always sort of assumed that it has to be primary ammo, but it actually doesn't say. So I've actually posted a question on the forums about this that hasn't been answered yet. But I believe since it doesn't specify which type of ammo you have to use, you could choose to use secondary ammo to deploy the turret, and that's what I'm going to do here. This might not be correct, but based on my reading of the rules, it doesn't actually specify you have to use primary ammo on this. So, first action for our engineer, we spent 1 ammo, and his first action to place this sentry... the placement really matters because the sentry will get a free attack on someone as soon as it spawns. So if I put the sentry here, anything that spawns out of cave entrance number 2 will get hit as soon as it appears. But it's too far away because it only has a range 3. It can't shoot at both cave entrances. If I sort of split the difference, then I wouldn't get spawn shots at either of them. So I have chosen to put the sentry turret in that space. Pretty well centered. It also guards our retreat from bugs that may be chasing us as we're running back to the drop pod. I think that's a good spot. Now, our engineer can't move, but he does still have his platform gun, which I don't tend to use all that often. But you can place up to 3 platforms anywhere within your line of sight. They don't have to be connected, but this means that I can make that last area. Yep, and he can see this spot too. So now those are filled in spaces. You can walk right across them. Let's see, like explosions will still destroy those if it's like an area of effect thing, but we can walk right across them. So can the bugs, if that becomes important. But now our scout, if they only have like 2 or 3 movement, they can stop on one of those spaces on their way back. Our engineer has 1 action remaining. He doesn't have anything he can exchange supplies with. I suppose I can do an overclock. Yep, we're still trying to get more nitra. Okay, so he's going to spend his last action to overclock his SMGs. Now they've got range 5, which means he could protect the scout, at least in some of these locations, as long as he can see him. And if there's no hits, doesn't cost any ammo. So that did require 1 gold to do that upgrade. And now our engineer is done with his turn. You can choose to skip actions if you want to. If you don't want to spend the gold, for example, he could just take 2 actions because he's stuck with that dang web. It's the end of his turn. That web goes away, and we've got a cave leech attack. A cave leech attacks you from above. Dwarves within attack range of your space each receive a free reaction attack against it. If it survives, it attacks you. Okay, this was the engineer, so he's right in the middle of anybody. I think the driller is the only one who's out of range at range 5. So that means within turn order, everyone can take a shot at it. So the gunner is next. He can shoot with his semi-automatic or the minigun. Either way, he's really low on bullets after this. You only need 1 hit. Yeah, let's use that semi-automatic. So we get to roll 2 green dice. This is secondary weapon. This should get it. And if not, we can rely on the scout. Okay, we got a hit. That stops the cave leech, and our engineer is safe. I didn't think about the turret. I suppose the turret could take a free shot too. Let me check that. Check the rules. It does specifically say that dwarves can interrupt to perform an attack, a reaction attack. The sentry gun could not save you in this case. Good to know. So, our engineer is safe from the cave leech, and now it is the gunner's turn. Now, he really needs some ammo at this point, but we just spent some on overclock, so we need some nitra to help him. But the sentry gun should be doing a lot of that defensive duty that he's been involved in, so we can choose to send him into that cave over there. Next turn, the driller's going to be grabbing the last thing he can and then starting to come back to us, which means that we can afford to send the gunner deeper into the caves to cover these guys. We can have him move his 3, and then another 3. He'll carve out that last nitra himself that he needs for next time. Oh, double. Well, that means he can carve out 2 spaces. He might as well carve out both spaces next to them. We've got our first nitra. And he carves out both spaces. You don't have to use every result if you don't want to, but I assume there's a tiny chance maybe that will help us have an extra escape route if things get clogged up with bugs. That was the engineer's full turn. Now it is time for his event. Yep, mission-specific event, which is 1 grunt at every exit. So we've got new grunts again. And now we get to see the sentry turret activate for the first time. Once per event phase, the turret can shoot at each creature that activates or moves within its line of sight. So in this case, that bug is within its 3 spaces and line of sight, so when it spawns in, it gets to take 1 free attack. Now, its die is only a single green die, which is not the best, but he killed it, and it doesn't take any ammo beyond that ammo you set it up in the very beginning with. So that bug is just automatically gone. And next time the creatures activate, when that thing moves in by 3, it can take a shot as soon as that creature moves into the range 3. And if it takes multiple actions for it to get to us, it can take a shot once each event phase at those guys. So it's very ammo efficient, but it is easy for the bugs to take it out, especially if it's something like a web spitter that outranges it. But it is very nice when you're dealing with swarms of grunts. That is the end of the gunner's turn. We're into the driller's turn. Now, again, I can just do the move, but I want the nitra and maybe the chance of getting something extra out of that stalagmite that's next to me. So I'm going to roll, hoping to get the double instead of just moving into the nitra space. Well, I just got the nitra, which is not a bad thing. We now have plenty to call down the supply pod, which we're going to need pretty soon here. That was action number 1. Oh, there is another loot bug here. Like, I could move into the stalagmite and be greedy, try to get that too. But I think we've got enough stuff that we really just are going to need 1 supply pod and we'll be ready to go. So that was action number 1. Now we're going to have him move. 1, 2, 3. And now we get to demonstrate the zipline in use. So whenever you move into the zipline, you cross the entire zipline with just 1 point of movement. So the driller's last move action is going to be 1, 2, 3. And now he has gone past the engineer who was stuck last time, and he can come over here and help with all of this morkite in the back. End of his turn, we get a new event. Not again. Place a grunt at exits 1 and 3. And then all creatures activate, including the one that just spawned. So, new one spawns right there, closest to a dwarf, and all creatures activate. Let's see, it was outside of 3, so it moves 1. Now our turret gets to take a shot at it. Instantly dead. Blah. Now the other one, who has already spawned on that space, gets to move in. As soon as it's within range, the sentry takes a shot at it. This one survives for a turn. And his third action, he will choose to target a dwarf over the sentry gun. And we don't need to worry about the most recent one yet because he's out of movement for this turn. And that's the end of the driller's turn. We're back over to the scout. Now we can send that scout in to start doing some mining, because he's got plenty of cover from all these other dwarves. 1, 2, 3. Oh, he actually could take a shot at the one grunt that's in the way there. I think I'm going to choose not to this time. I've got the sentry gun, should be able to shoot that grunt with 2 more opportunities. That grunt will activate once to move in, and then it'll take another activation for it to attack anybody. So the turret should get 2 shots at it, barring a special card that's move and attack within a single event phase. But I'm going to hold on to his ammo for something bigger, because he doesn't have a lot left. First action, move in. Second action, we're going to use the pickaxe, mine those walls. Well, he just got 1, so we're going to take the morkite, because that's our objective. We've now got 2 of the 3, and he's already back here. Do I have him take the gold? Because he's not going to be able to mine this turn. Maybe that's something I saved for the driller to go in there. So yeah, we're going to take our last pickaxe and just try to get that gold. We got it. Another one of these individual pieces. And we have a whole bunch of stuff stored up in our mule. That's the end of the scout's turn. Just a nice move and pickaxe turn. What have we got? Dugout surprise. Place a grunt on an empty ground space adjacent to you, if possible. So we've got a surprise grunt. Empty ground space next to you. I suppose that space works too, then the driller might be in range. Dwarves within attack range of the grunt each receive a free reaction against it. If it survives, it attacks you. So we got ambushed again, but this time it was by a grunt rather than a slasher. So we're in a little bit less danger. So in turn order, the engineer can't see it. He's blocked from line of sight by the driller. The gunner can take a shot at it. So I think we're going to use our last secondary ammo from the gunner. And he's going to take his shot of 2 green dice at the grunt that just ambushed us. He got it. Okay. That's excellent. If you can prevent yourself from getting damage on these ambushes, it definitely helps your longevity in the mines. Well, in the caves. I suppose we're mining them, but they're not really mines. It's all just caves with minerals in them. Okay. Our scout has been saved. Now it is the engineer's turn, and this time he is no longer webbed. I think with our engineer, because he's the furthest one back, we're going to have him stay back and just sort of cover the rear, or cover the main cave. And because of his secondary weapon being those upgraded Zhukov SMGs, if he misses, he doesn't even spend ammo. So we might as well take the shot, and it doesn't cost us anything if he misses. So let's just secondary weapon attack that grunt. We got him. Okay, grunt gone. That did cost us an ammo. Now, I think it's a good time to call in that resupply pod, because we've got a whole bunch of people who are starting to get really low. We're going to spend 2 nitra and 1 gold to call in a resupply. He's going to just call it in right next to himself. I believe the supply pod doesn't block line of sight. Even though it looks really tall, it's actually on this little drill base. So it's actually drilling into the ground a bit, and it's not as tall as it looks like in the game. Well, it looks taller than all of the dwarves, but it's not as tall as it looks, or perhaps you can see around it. But I believe in the rules, it doesn't block line of sight. Okay, his second action was calling down the resupply. Of course, we need to actually determine what's on that supply pod. So what did we get? We got 8 primary ammo, 1 secondary ammo, and 3 health were in this pod, which is great because we were using up a whole lot of primary ammo during this one. So we put down 8. 1 and 3. And this is what's in that pod. I'm just sort of setting it out there. It's not really in the wall. But that is what is in that pod. So now our engineer can interact with that to pull as much as he can into it, from it rather. And he's the only one who's actually taken damage, so he can get his health back. And he can take, he can completely refill his primary ammunition with that. So our engineer is fully stocked, ready for anything that spawns at the end of his turn, which is now. Unsettling rumblings. Increase swarm threat by 1. We're 1 away from a swarm. If this didn't trigger a swarm, draw another event card. Ugh, it's a chained one. What have we got? Mission-specific event. There are a number of these in the deck, and as we remember, that immediately spawns a grunt at each entrance. And because our turret is in range of tunnel entrance number 2, we get an attack on it with that turret. but it misses on the spawn attack. Okay, and they do not activate at this time. That was the engineer's turn. Now we're over to the gunner, who really, really, really wants some of that ammo. He's not about to die due to lack of it, but he needs that in order to be able to do his job of shooting stuff. So we're going to move him over to there for 1. We're going to interact with the supply pod. He'll take the only secondary ammo because he really needs it, and he'll fill all the way up on that main ammo. Now, where he is, he doesn't have line of sight on anybody. I don't think I want to move him any deeper into the cave. I'm going to move him back out to here. That way, because he can shoot over the turret on the one side, and he's got a clear shot, he can continuously just resupply from the pod, use up his ammo, and he can just protect everyone from that central position. So his last action was a move, and he ends his turn. His event is More Unsettling Rumblings. Increase the swarm threat by 1. This triggers a swarm, so we ignore the rest of this card, and now we've got our next swarm card. I forgot to... Nope. Forgot to separate out the 2 special cards. That's fine. Place 1 Mactera Spawn at exit 1 and 3 grunts at exit 2. Okay, we need more grunts. They're actually starting to stack up on us. Okay, so a Mactera Spawn is a flying bug with a ranged attack. It's a nasty thing. And interestingly, it says spawn 3 grunts at exit 2, so we put them as close as we can, but our turret is going to get free shots at 2 of those ones that just spawned. And after this, we will activate all creatures. So our turret is going to take a shot at each one of those 2 grunts in range. It got the first one. This is the turret doing what the turret does best. I missed the second one. Okay, that was it for the spawning. Now things get to attack. So grunts always go first. I like to go closest to farthest. So this is the closest one, or those 2 anyway, are the closest to our engineer here. So it starts to move, and as soon as it activates within range of the turret gets a shot at it. Turret missed again. So now he walks straight up to our friend, the engineer. This next one activates. You can see over the little grunt guys, so the turret can... He's also got line of sight. Regardless, he missed again. Our turret is not doing well all of a sudden. Okay, and this last one in the back, as soon as it moves into range, because it can see over the grunts, it gets a shot at this one. Hey, got this one. And they're free shots. I can't be too choosy, but killing lots of grunts is really what the turret does best. Now we've got a grunt on this side. On the far side, our gunner is blocking the turret from line of sight, so the turret doesn't get his free attacks here. So he walks up to the gunner. He doesn't attack in the same turn. His activation is spent entirely on movement. And this Mactera Spawn has a range of 3, so he still has to get 1 space closer. But creatures with ranged attacks go until they get into range so that they can make an attack, and then they stop. So that on his next activation, he can make his ranged attack at the gunner as well. Eek. So we've got a bunch of stuff that just came up on us really fast. Swarms? Pretty dangerous. Now, whose turn was that? I believe that was the gunner's turn, which is unfortunate because it would be really nice to have the gunner activate right now. But now it is our digger's turn. Or, yeah, the driller's turn. We're all diggers. So he has that corrosive bomb that is really, really good at killing grunts. What I wanted to do was just send him out here and mine as much as we could, because he's really good at it. But I need him to protect our folks. So yeah, I'm going to have him... He's going to expend his corrosive bomb, the grenade he got from the very beginning of the game, choose a space within range 4, and every space on or adjacent to that space takes a damage. He's just going to target... Yeah, he can hit right there, so he will just kill those 2 grunts with his corrosive bomb. Action number 1. Action number 2, remember that the supply pod, despite looking like a really tall miniature, let's see if I can get a better shot of this. On the overhead, they're sort of muddling together. So we've got our engineer, our gunner, and our driller with the supply pod behind them. But it's the driller's turn, and despite having that supply pod, he can still see straight over it to the grunt and the Mactera over on the other side. Okay. So his second action, we're going to have him lay down fire. The fire is going to block the Mactera's line of sight, so the bug will have to move to try to get back its line of sight again. And hopefully we can kill the grunt. So we're using his second fire ability, which is roll 2 dice and put down 3 flame tokens. And there's my yellow dice. He is targeting the grunt, the one that's just on the other side of the supply pod. Okay, he did 1 damage. He killed the grunt, and then that is the first place where we must put our flame tokens. And after that, we can place 2 more as long as they are contiguous and within his range of 3. So even though I want to, I can't put the last one over there. But I can just block out that area. So that flame will persist until the driller's next turn. Our driller has 1 more action, although thankfully we have protected everyone from the Mactera, so let's put him towards doing some digging, doing what he does best. He's standing on that platform provided earlier by the engineer. And we're going to have those 2 try to drill, those 2 fight bugs. Sounds like a good plan. Okay, now it is the end of the driller's turn. We get a new event card. Creature Pile Up. Place this on top of the swarm deck. Whenever the next swarm activation occurs, discard this and you draw 2 swarm cards instead of 1. Ooh. So our next swarm will be a double swarm. That sounds ominous. Okay. What is next? Next, we are back up to the Scout again. Scout, who is all the way back here. Thankfully, the Mactera didn't spawn, so we still have that flame protecting us. Or it didn't activate and move around the flame. So we don't need to send our Scout that way to try to prevent damage. We can let him stay over here and try to drill out some of these things. Let's see. I think this is a good time to use another card, a Rock and Stone card that the driller has. You can use them on other players' turns. Look through the Throwables deck, give any throwable to another dwarf, then shuffle the deck. So we've used a Rock and Stone card because I really want to give the Satchel Charge to the Scout right now. Because we're just going to use that right away, so that doesn't take an action out of the Scout's turn. The Rock and Stone cards do not take an action. So now our Scout has the Satchel Charge, which is a great item. You can place down its... place its token onto the board, detonate at any chosen time, roll the 2 red dice, apply them to each space hit, and destroy stalagmites, platforms, and walls in all spaces next to it. So it's a nasty thing. And here's its token. Okay, the card has a range of 1, so I can place this satchel token 1 space away from where the Scout is right now. We'll put it into that corner space. And now our Scout can move away and then detonate it and leave that stuff just sitting on the ground for the driller to pick up on his turn. And he can just grab all the Morkites so we're ready as soon as the next turn comes around. So that took 1 action to place down that throwable. He has 2 more left. I don't want to leave the driller all alone back here, but I do want to get out of the way so I don't take 2 red dice worth of damage. So we're just going to move to there. And from there, we actually have a shot on that Mactera, again, because we can see over this tall supply pod. Imagine it's not there. And our folks can shoot through the flames, but the bugs cannot. So that is a range 5 shot. We actually could hit it with the experimental plasma charger with the red die. Let's see, Mactera spawn It has 1 resistance to flame dice, but we're not using flame dice. We got 1 action left. Well, actually, we just moved, so we can take the free action from the blue die, his post-movement free attack. So we're going to use his regular shot from the sniper rifle, expend an ammo. He's going to shoot at that Mactera. Wow, 2 hits again. Mactera has 2 health on it, so he managed to shoot it down. Our scout is just getting 2 damage every shot. Lucky guy. And he's got 1 more shot, or 1 more action, because that was a free attack after his move. We're going to move him next to the supply pod, but still within line of sight of the driller. That way we can spend a reaction attack if we need to. And he's also next to the supply pod, so he could get more of this ammo because it looks like he needs it. End of his turn. Event is he's found a crack in the floor. Your sharp eyes notice a grenade in a nearby crack. Some Greenbeard must have left it behind on a previous mission. If you lie down, you should be able to reach it. So you can choose to become knocked down to draw a throwable card. And if you're knocked down, you can already just choose to do that. In this case, I am not going to get knocked down. Our scout is the guy who is covering the driller right now, and oftentimes if you're knocked down, the only action you can do is to stand back up. You can't do covering fire if you're knocked down. So I don't want to put the scout in a bad situation there. So I'm going to choose not to partake in that particular bad effect. Next up is the engineer. So he's got his full movement now. There's nothing for him to attack at the moment. Any other bonuses he can do? I could send him over. I can have him... Yeah, right now it's pretty much... Let's prepare our way back to the exit, I think. So he's going to use the rest of his platforms, because all of those things are in line of sight to him from right here. So 1 action, you can place up to 3 platforms in your line of sight. We're just going to completely paper over every pit that's left on this board. Next action, because he is entirely full on his ammunition, and he still has his throwable too, we're going to start walking him back towards... Oh, I completely forgot. As soon as our last dwarf stepped off of the supply, or the drop pod, it leaves and becomes just the floor. But we know that's where it's going to come back. As soon as we've picked up the last Morkite, we can put our engineer in the drop pod immediately if we just start walking him over now. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and he's going to hang out right next to that space. And his turn over there, he's ready to hop in. We've found the sweet spot. The walls around you are covered in gold and red sugar. Will you take the time to gather some? So if you are not knocked over, you can roll the pickaxe die. For each symbol rolled, gain either 2 health or 1 gold. Then increase the swarm threat by 1. So I can let the swarm threat increase by 1 to get more health or gold. Well, we're in a really great spot. We don't even need gold right now. So let's just delay the swarm. I'm going to choose not to partake of that particular one, but that is a pretty sweet card. Okay, that's engineer's turn. Now it's the gunner's turn. Once again, we have nothing to shoot. He's in a pretty good position. I'm a little bit worried about that stalagmite, but he did fully refill his primary weapon as much as he can. So I'm going to have him move to next to that stalagmite, and we're just going to try to eliminate that stalagmite so we've got a perfectly clear line of sight across the room. You got it. And so that is destroyed, and because he knocked down a stalagmite, we roll the resource die. We get a nitra. So hey, we could call down another supply drop if we needed to. And he still does have another action. Yeah, because we've got such clear lines of sight, let's put him with his third action next to where the drop pod's coming down as well. They've both got a pretty good range. Anything that spawns is going to be in trouble. Now, we draw for the end of his turn. We've got they're closing in. Increase the swarm threat by 1. If this didn't trigger a swarm, activate all creatures. There aren't any. Yep. And this is something that's part of like this being the Greenbeard first mission. One thing that will happen in the later scenarios is in those caves that you uncover, they're going to have creatures in them. So there's going to be more creatures than just the ones that are spawning at the end of the turn that are coming into play as you're exploring. And that's one of the things that also adds difficulty as you're mining through the caves. So part of the reason we keep getting these activate all creatures with no creatures is A, we're making sure the creatures don't stick around longer than a turn, and B, there just aren't as many that started on the board or are being revealed as we go through the mission. And remember, there is a timer going on, and if we reach the end of the track and have to draw more, then we would lose just based off of time. So even if there's no bugs around here, we can't just sit back. We need to be mining. And in this case, I am sitting back, but I've got a very strong plan for getting to the rest of this stuff. So we're still doing fine. Okay, that was the gunner's turn. Now we're on to the driller's turn. Well, we happen to have this satchel charge that's been waiting for most of a round. Oh, right. The flame tokens expire. So let's detonate that satchel charge. Boom. So that means we have mined out the walls in each space next to it. So that is now a space. This is a space. Yeah, those are all now walkable, and the morkite just drops to the floor in whatever space it was in. Now we can just walk through the rest of it. The throwable, that was activated anytime. It wasn't an action to detonate the satchel charge. So let's just have our driller go clockwise around and pick this up. 1, 2, 3. And then he will end his turn by walking into that last space. So he carves that out, and that is the last space of his second move. And he has picked up all 3 morkite. So that was 2 actions. It was a move of 3, and then a move that ended when he went into the wall. So he's got an action left. Now, we just picked up the last morkite. That means all of our objectives have been met, and the drop pod has returned to pick us up. So the drop pod, I didn't talk about that very much for end of game stuff, but the drop pod is basically a safe zone. Once your dwarves have entered the drop pod, they can't be attacked by creatures anymore, but they can still fire out of it. So the drop pod is our destination. Once our dwarves are on those 4 spaces and we've collected all of the objectives, we win. The drop pod leaves with all of us aboard. So that is now the objective. Everyone get to the dropper. So our driller has 1 action of moves left. 1, 2, 3. If I'm lucky, I can just spend the next round running everyone straight onto the ship without having to shoot anything. That would be great. The sentry turret doesn't need to leave with us. It doesn't take up one of those spaces, so it can just sit there and defend. That was the driller's 3 actions. Time for our next event. Fast critters. Increase the swarm threat by 1. This did not trigger a swarm, but there also are no creatures to move and attack, so we ignore the rest of that instead. Okay, the scout. There's a slight bit of, I don't want to leave the driller all by himself out there, but nothing's going to spawn right next to him, and things only ambush you at the end of your turn, because they always ambush the person who drew the card. So I'm not as worried about leaving the driller alone right now. All these other people are going to get a chance to shoot at anything that spawns before it can get to him. So, our scout, he's actually going to get 2 moves. He can get to his space pretty easily. Now let's just triple move our scout. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We'll just store him in the back. He is safe and clear. He cannot be attacked anymore. And we draw the event for his turn. There's a pebble in my boot. You take time to empty your boot and find a lump of gold. Collect 1 gold, and then the swarm threat increases by 1. Now that swarm threat increase has gotten us to a swarm, and because we've got the creature pile up, we've got a double swarm coming in. So this time, we draw 2 swarm cards instead of 1, placing all creatures before resolving the activation. So our first one is Slash and Smash. place one slasher at exit 1. There we go. And 2 grunts each at exits 2 and 3. So in this case, our turret is going to get a shot at both of those that just spawned over there, although we're not done with our spawning yet. And our second swarm card is, what's that buzzing sound? Place 3 grunts at exit 1 and 1 Mactera spawn at exit 2. So we've got 3 additional grunts over there in front of our slasher, and 1 flying bug has spawned at exit 2. Okay. Now, because all the spawns have been completed, put those in the wrong deck. Gonna have to filter those out later. That's fine. Now our turret is going to get his free shots at the 3 who spawned down there. One at a time. Closest grunt dies. Other grunt dies. And let's check. Yeah, the Mactera has resistance against flame, but not regular bullets, so our turret does get a shot off. No damage to the spawn. Okay, and now all of the enemy creatures activate. So grunts always go first. These guys are closest. 1, 2, 3. But now he's within range of that turret. Our turret gets a free shot on it. I love turrets. And that grunt dies before it gets into melee range. Next grunt. 1, 2, 3. Oh, you're in range. That one has survived, though. And this last one. 2, 3. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4. The turret is the closest thing, so it's actually going for that. And turret gets a shot. Turret got that one. So the turret has filtered out 4 grunts from that swarm. That grunt doesn't get to attack because its full activation was spent on the movement. The next one in the list is the Mactera spawn before the slasher would go. So the spawn activates, and it has a range 3 attack, so it's actually simultaneously attacking the turret, which is in its range. It has 1 attack die, and it may stun, but turrets can't be stunned. So this is actually going to be a simultaneous attack. I'll just roll both dice at the same time. Okay, so neither of them did anything. The turret did no damage to the spawn, and the spawn's special ability would be to stun, and you can't stun a turret. So basically, the spawn wasted his attack on trying to hit that turret. So, turret's still helping us. Now, the slasher gets to move. It would target, because it's 5 away from both, it's targeting our gunner. It is within range of the turret, but because it resists 1 point of green regular bullet damage, even if the turret hit it, it would just resist, so I'm not going to bother rolling. So we've got a nasty slasher in place, but honestly, that swarm, more than half of it was simply taken out by that lucky turret. So yes, turret's area of defense. But you'll note that against the tougher bugs, or things that have resistance to it, the turret is much less effective. So you do need to supplement the turret, because that spawn really, really should have taken out that turret. Okay. Well, that was a whole lot of stuff that happened at the end of the scout's turn. So now it is the engineer's turn. Taking a quick look at, because he's got 2 different area of effect things. His grenade launcher, if you just roll 1 die, it can hit an area, which would get both of those guys. He also has the electrocution grenade, which would not damage, but would stun each of those creatures. It might kill the grunt. But let's just use that grenade launcher. If he ends up just completely failing, he can always go to the electrocution grenade. And the slasher has flame resistance, but not explosion resistance. So our grenade launcher from our engineer, he's going to target... Let's target the grunt. We really want to kill that grunt. Actually, let's target the slasher, because there's a chance I might get a double hit, and that would be enough to kill the slasher. Okay. So we're using... Oh, I'm going to hit both of them. It doesn't matter which one I target, because I'm targeting the whole area. So they each suffer they get the scare result, which means I can move each bug one space of my choice. I don't believe, because it's not their activation, the turret's not going to get a free shot in, but I can move them back, and that means that next time this grunt activates, it's not going to get a shot in at my engineer. I suppose I should keep them together, because let's shoot them again. Another primary ammo used. Targeting both. This time I got a double damage, so they both die. It doesn't matter that I scared them, they are just dead. Okay, he's got one action left. We're going to move him into the back of the drop pod. And he's in a good spot now. Okay. Next thing is, I hate bugs. Place a grunt at exit 1, then all creatures activate. Okay. With this activation, we once again have, well, I guess the grunt goes first. And that's important because I suppose if he wanted to say that the bugs are smart, he would stay out of range of the turret. But bugs aren't that smart. Maybe something more advanced than a grunt, I would let hug the wall and avoid the turret until the turret gets killed. But turret gets a shot. Turret misses. Okay. That grunt doesn't get to melee range. Now we've got the Mactera. So we've got another simultaneous attack. The Mactera wants to attack, and the turret is also lining up an attack. Oops, I missed. I can't see what it is, but it's a hit. Okay, so they've both hit, which means our Mactera spawn has taken 1 damage, but it has 2 health, and our turret has been destroyed. Thankfully, we can just place down more turrets using more ammo later, but at the very least, that turret held off the spawn so it wasn't attacking others. That is it for the activations. Now it is our gunner's turn. And our gunner, yep, he is within range 5, so he can take some shots now. And yeah, the Mactera does not resist the regular bullets. Well, he's got a full 5 there. Let's just start blasting with the minigun, because after this, the driller's just going to run across, and hopefully we're home free. So let's target the Mactera first. That's a bit more of a pain because it can stun with its attacks, and that would mess up the whole running away thing. So, okay, that is enough to kill the Mactera. The Mactera spawn, because it's got 2 health and does not resist those green bullets. I got 2 hits. It was already damaged anyway. Okay, now we're going to take advantage of the minigun special ability to keep shooting without spending any more actions. So spend a second ammo, and now we're shooting at the grunt right next to us. We got enough hits to kill it. Okay, spent 2 ammo. Lots of hits. Now he will spend the rest of his turn moving into the next farthest back space. We don't need to use any more actions for him. He's done. If we're lucky, this is the last event of the game. They're closing in. Increase the swarm threat by 1. This did not trigger a swarm. Activate all creatures. There's nothing left. Now it is our driller's turn, and our driller can just make a mad dash across the map to the exit. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. We have reached the supply pod with all of our dwarves, and it returns back to the space rig, and we are victorious. We have completed the introductory mission. We collected all 5 of the Morkite from the walls of this cave, as well as the 3 Apocablooms. This was an example playthrough of Deep Rock Galactic. You've got the 4 different classes. They play very differently, but they also help each other. Their specialties really fit together and don't step on each other too much. I really, really like this game. So I'm definitely going to be playing more of this. That's why this one is on the wheel. I definitely want to get into some of those later missions that I definitely have not seen before. I've played maybe the first 3 or so. I've just played those a lot of times with different rotating people who join in for a game. So, I hope you had a lot of fun with this game, and hope to see you in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.